All right, we'll call this meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to this meeting of the South Burlington School Board. And we'll start with any comments from the public regarding items that are not on the agenda. And seeing none, we'll move on. Any amendments to the agenda, David?
No.
Okay. No. So why don't we move into the city-school collaboration?
Mm-hmm. So again, just a quick update for those who've heard this before. Elizabeth and I meet pretty regularly now with the city manager and the chair of the council, and have had several conversations around budget. And as of recent, we've actually talked a little bit, it was today or yesterday? Today, also with just kind of business partnerships. We had opportunity to talk with individual from the Business Roundtable and really talk about kind of our work, city and school, connecting to the business community. So we continue to have those discussions. I don't know if, Elizabeth, you wanted to add to any of that, just kind of giving a brief overview of our work. But.
Yeah, I think the Lisa Ventris was with us today from Vermont Business Roundtable and really was interested in hearing specifically what South Burlington is doing in terms of everything from ends to cultural competency to our teaching staff to a number of different areas. And the focus that the Vermont Business Roundtable has is really looking at education as the most significant economic development program the state can invest in. So they've got some specific initiatives, and they've got some nice cross-functional working teams with a goal of actually coming up with some recommendations, I think in the June timeframe they were talking about. And a couple of specific areas are really, my notes are a little bit hard to read, but it was really about kind of focused in the education area on kind of prenatal to pre-K. In the K-12 through area, it was really looking at outcomes, looking at transitions and bridges, and looking at barriers to higher education. And then really defining what the education system should deliver and how resources might be allocated. So they also have a specific interest in the changing demographics, or how do we kind of keep kids that might come from lower socioeconomic situations in the educational system and engaged. So they have a lot of specific interest. I don't think we have an idea of what their recommendations will be, but the interest very much aligned with a lot of what South Burlington has prioritized and what we deliver within our system. So I know David or his delegate will be invited to a meeting they have in March to speak about Common Core. And we're going to stay engaged with Vermont Business Roundtable, really not only to understand what the opportunities are for our students as they progress through the public education system in terms of ongoing education, but also with local employers too, and really engaging. We talked about a number of interesting ideas that might include I know Microsoft, I believe, has a competition called Imagine Cup, and that it's actually a pre-employment screening tool that Microsoft uses to really kind of identify talent on an international basis, but they set up competitions that fall into specific areas like environmental, biotech. It might be a number of different areas, and certainly we have some themes in the state that would be of interest. But as a specific example, there might be a statewide competition that Vermont Business Roundtable might be, employers might be, or businesses might be interested in engaging and supporting, that would really start to identify competencies and proficiencies students have around the state, not only for potential screening purposes, but also helping schools kind of link curriculum with employment skills as well. So it was a really interesting conversation to have, and one that presents a lot of possible linkages, but a lot of work to be done too.
I think the other part was recognition of some of the work that, as a district, we are, particularly administrators, have been reaching out to, and actually going out to businesses and soliciting kind of their feedback, which is, I think, in part connected to this work. So I think we're headed in a positive place.
Yep. Good. All right. All right, we'll shift on to item number 6, an update on the methadone clinic appeal.
So again, as we've reported in the past, that appeal is now been set for a date certain of March 17th at 10 o'clock, and it's going to be, the oral arguments are going to be heard in front of the Supreme Court at Vermont Law School, again, March 17th at 10 o'clock. So that's kind of the next step. We did file a brief, 6-page brief, which will be available to the public to see. But that's kind of where we are currently with the Howard Center permit to open the methadone clinic on Dorset Street. So,
okay. Good. Any questions? All right. We'll turn to our student representative. You're kind of by yourself tonight.
Yeah.
Huh?
Well, first of all, Sabrina's not here because she left for TIE,
Yes,
France today. So that's really exciting for everyone.
early,
that's going.
no, 11 o'clock or something. Right?
Yeah. So last week there was a competition called DECA, and there's about 40 students in our school that's doing DECA, and we did really, really well, and a lot of teams and individuals got awards, first, second, and third, and it was just really awesome and a fun experience. I was there, and also all the Vermont DECA is led by all of us SB students now, all like vice president and president. So it's really awesome that we just came in 2 years ago and we're like already leading DECA. So that was fun. Also last week we had Gatsby, and that was a great turnout. And also, even though winter sports and stuff are finishing, talent night is coming up. So everyone's really, really busy. After schools are taken over by talent night. And lastly, student council is starting to plan our Spirit Week, which is going to happen at the end of March. Yeah.
Right.
A few things going on.
Yeah.
Any questions? Great. Thank you. All right. We'll move on to our superintendent's report.
So I have two items that, one was to provide you a little bit on kind of the safety update, and I've outlined just a couple things in here on acceptable use policy. Again, I think it's always good for us to be revisiting this, particularly in the light of the, just increased technology. So I've given you a little kind of an overview of what we're doing on and kind of some next steps to reevaluate and look at that policy with opportunity to bring that back to folks, you folks, after administrators, again, look at it. Access to buildings, again, this kind of goes into the safety kind of situation as well. Just safety updates are after-school activities particularly. We're talking a little bit more now around, where are we with vulnerability in the district around after-school. Right at the end of the day, our doors are open. And so we're asking the question, looking at kind of a risk assessment, what should we be doing, if at all, different? Kind of from the end of the day, so at the elementary, that's kind of that 2:20 until 6 o'clock. And then here and at the high school, it's really that kind of 3:15 until 6 o'clock as well. A lot of our staff are here, a lot of our students are here, and so the question is really being asked, should we be doing something a little bit different than just having all of our doors open? Obviously, that poses some real logistic concerns because you have high volumes sometimes going back and forth. So, it's got to be done kind of with some reasonableness, particularly big game events where there's a couple hundred coming in. It's really hard to say you can control that. But on normal day-to-day, maybe there's opportunity. So we're looking at that and doing some risk assessments. Camera use, again, we have our protocols currently, but looking at how we use them and how we could continue to be able to use them in the event that there's an emergency, and do we have the right training, do we have the right equipment is really a component connected to that. Our school resource officers, we have had an MOU that's been out there with job description, but it's not been updated for a while, so actually I'm supposed to meet with Trevor, but that had to change from yesterday to next week. So he and I and Karen Dancher, the HR director, are looking at the MOU and the job description. And again, that's no reflection at all, but positive. And we're so fortunate to have 3 school resource officers making connections with our students and our staff. But again, we want to make sure that, there's some common understanding and purpose around what we're doing. And really the last one is just our general safety protocols, looking at how we're doing. And I do cite one. As a result, we've moved our safety office, our safety and facility space to the north side of the middle school. And, just being mindful of how that's going and looking at some of any collected data that we have. We did have one person that was, wandering around that needed to be moved along, and we needed some assistance from the police department in that one, but again, it was taken care of. So that's really on kind of the safety update, and I put acceptable use into that as well. And then the other is the 5th grade transition update. I did have had a great opportunity to go out and connect with the PTOs at the 3 schools, and I think that was just an absolute, from my perspective, really great to connect with a lot of the folks who've had questions, who still have questions and concerns, and to be able to meet them. And so I was very appreciative to the PTO folks that have helped to set that up. I think there's more needed, so we'll continue that. So the steering committee has now met, and we have a tomorrow meeting. We've named all the committees, and the first meeting will be tomorrow, starting at 4:30 here in this space. And so that will be the first kind of charge for the committees, setting kind of their expected work ahead and collecting and helping them get on their way. So
do all the committees are staffed at this point?
All the committees right now are staffed, and again, thanks to Delina for her work and getting out emails and getting back confirmation. It's been I think an appropriate process. And the hard part, of course, is dates, right? Not we put out all of the dates, and so there are some places where not everybody can make all of them. So we're working around that, and that will be kind of up to the committee. We're going to have co-chairs on each of the committees, so we'll have likely an administrator and a parent rep kind of co-chairing those committees, which I think will be really helpful as we move forward. So anyway.
And are the committees listed on the online information?
Currently, right now, just the steering committee is, but we will post up. I mean, once we get confirmation of everybody, particularly after tomorrow night, then we'll push open.
And is that a link through the individual school sites or through the district site?
Right now, it's a link through the district, right, Stuart?
Yes.
Is that right? And making that available at each school site is a desire that we have talked about through the steering committee to make sure that there's easy access to that. So, yeah. And Stuart has been, again, instrumental in that, helping to we're going to have frequently asked questions that will be up and updated, the charge of each committee membership, so people will be able to kind of see things, as it goes along, if they're not able to be part of the committee or not able to come to some of the meetings. So.
Are there people that wanted to be represented on the committee and couldn't be?
Yes.
Is there an avenue for them to have their input?
Yeah, so certainly they can follow along in the correspondence that's going to be unfolded. Certainly school board meetings are always a good place for them to come and share. Pushing out a frequently asked question to the committee. Steering committee gets them actually. I have, kind of those rolled up. There's been some recent work on that. But when a frequently asked question has come in, we've targeted it to a specific committee. All committees will get to see it. But, infrastructure may be dealing with, transportation or busing or et cetera. So, so we believe that people will have involvement. We're close to about 60 folks involved. So we have a high percentage of participation on these 4 committees. It's unfortunate that some people couldn't make it, but or couldn't be picked. But we do think that the process will be involved as we move through the upcoming months. Okay.
Any other board questions? Any questions from the public? Yes.
I know I'm dating myself. but we plowed this ground relative to the 5th grade when the middle school first opened. And in my conversations with Delina, I asked her if we had records of the minutes of the school board meetings from, the first beginnings of the middle school. And we do. And I think that would be a valuable source to research relative to the issues that parents brought up then relative to the move.
Give us
And
a
I'm
recap. Give us a recap.
And I'm convinced that the district has changed in many ways relative to the concerns that parents expressed in those days. And as I read some of the preliminary information, the same concerns are coming up. But the district is a different district today in a lot of different ways. And I think it would be beneficial and it would bear on the final decision to do a little research.
That's good.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tom.
So a little research around the past history, not the future.
The issues of the past history as they pertain to maybe some of the concerns that are expressed today.
Good. Other comments or questions? Yes.
So there's a undercurrent conversation, whatever you want to call it, among a lot of parents, wondering about this this plan that's on your website. So there was a study that was completed 8 years ago. And when you look at that study, this is mentioned in moving the 5th grade to middle school several times. It's also mentioned that Central School could either be closed and the elementaries combined, or it would be turned over to City Center, the central property. So the concern is this part of a bigger picture plan? And I think, if it is, people just want to know. They don't feel like they're well informed. They don't feel like they really have an understanding for where this is coming from and why it's coming. There's more to it than what we've seen so far. And I think the greater community, especially the parents, would, if they knew what the big picture plan was for the school system, it'd be a lot easier to buy into this. If it's financial, and we've got a current system that's not sustainable. Mr. Young made that clear. 8% on our tax dollars every year. You can't keep asking for that. It's not going to work. There's got to be a better way. But is that part of why this decision is being made? I think people just don't feel like they're getting the whole picture. So beyond this study that's online, is there a plan that people can look at to have a better understanding of where the system will be in 20 years?
You want to respond?
Sure. Well, I think, again, some of the board members have been here back when we did that, and actually some of the folks in the room were here when we did that and participated, both city, school, 8 years ago to do that. I certainly have been, since I've been here, have tried to keep that conversation of master planning, collaborative work together. I can't say that it's been on, on every meeting, but certainly every steering committee that we've had to try to make sure the document or the energy around planning together is really important. And so I think what Mark brings up is really valid. We definitely, both city and school, and I think school board agrees, we need to have a plan, for our future. And when we have things like the city center or that undeveloped land, we need to have a plan. And we don't want to be a school district that's reactionary. And so that's been the major impetus around the master planning and visioning to come up with a plan. And I think, we received that plan, both city and school, and we essentially, we said, thank you for doing that. It basically, at that point, confirmed we were doing the right thing and we didn't need to make a change. Although we all knew that there was things upon us that needed to be explored. So really, I think my energy has been over, again, my 9 years have been, we got to come up with a plan. And I felt that it needs to be coordinated with the city, as I said earlier, and that's really been the driving force. As far as the fifth grade, again, I think there's a lot of different configurations that were mentioned in that report. You know, there was, you know, Mr. Locker and his committee broke it down into all kinds of different configurations. Some, you know, you got to kind of read the scale on how to interpret that. And certainly one was probably the fifth grade and other K2s and 3-4s and different things. So for me, that remains critically important, and I think the board has entered into that desire for the master plan. For me, the specific reason is in the best interest of students in our district currently is definitely, from my perspective, to look at this proposed option of fifth grade as a right and just option. I don't know when that plan will unfold and be developed. I'd like to think it could be sooner rather than later, but that was also said 9 years ago. And I feel that I owe it to the community, most particularly the students, to come up with what I think is leveraging our resources, providing those opportunities that I think should be provided to our fifth graders developmentally, is a driving force. So yes, it's connected to the master plan. Somewhere, someplace, sometime, I hope sooner rather than later, but this is not, and I think the board, you certainly, this has not been like, this is not phase one of the master plan. That's not been communicated. We don't have the master plan done. I see this as an important need for the students, and I think Mark brings up a good point around this clarity. Is really important and needed, you know, to the community.
I think the community would be forgive me, but a hell of a lot happier with it if they knew there was a master plan,
yeah.
And that this fit into it somehow.
Yep.
So along that line, this week came out school rankings. I forget exactly who did them, but you know, South Burlington schools were represented in the top 10 twice. Well done, thank you. But of the models represented there, 2 of them were K through 5, both South Burlington schools. 1 was a K through 8, 1 was a K through 4, and the 6 remaining, including, I believe, the top 4, I think, were all K through 5 models. Does that impact the thinking around this, that in Vermont, it would appear, at least according to that study, that the K through 6 model is the most beneficial, you know, followed by the K through 5, you know, and then K through 4 and K through 8 kind of just are there. Who knows why?
I think the configurations, you know, Mark, are going to be a really important conversation of the committees. The outcome of the work of the combined committees and the report that rolls up, whatever the action may be, I think does have to play a major role into feeding kind of the next steps. So, you know, I think all of that information is going to weigh in, and you know, the frequently asked questions that have come in, or the work ahead for some of our committees, are going to be to look at some of those collected data points that we know are schools that are configured out there. So I think, you know, we have our work ahead, and I'm happy for the conversation and what will come out of the conversation, whether it is a direction that I'll recommend to move forward or not. I think we're going to be a better off school district for having the conversation in a respectful and informed way.
And on that note, I absolutely, totally, and completely agree with
Yeah.
you. I just got to say one last thing. I am still very, very concerned that we're not hearing from the teachers, especially at Orchard. And I think we are missing an enormous opportunity to involve our kids in this conversation and allow them the chance to see what it is to participate in a process like this and make decisions that reflect around themselves. I mean, they're our future leaders, right? You know, they're going to be the future board members sitting where you're sitting now. Boy, oh boy, if there was ever anything that will drive a lesson home for them, it would be this type of process. And there's no conversations, to my knowledge, taking place at Orchard, other than among the kids themselves, and they're talking about it. So you don't even have to answer it, David. I'm just, you know, I'm curious in my own head, and I see an opportunity lost.
Well, again, I do want to just quickly respond, because Mark and I have had the opportunity to talk, and Mark had come to the PTO meetings, and I'm very appreciative, again, of all of the feedback that I've received kind of in group or in one-on-ones. The steering, the kickoff meeting tomorrow night, I think these are some of the conversations that we want to talk about. We've also got, panel of experts and folks that could be invited in. What are the things that we could engage with our students? So there's a variety of things that I think the path is yet not determined. And to Mark's point, maybe we're a little bit late on the student engagement, but it's not that we don't want that. I think that should be a conversation and a desire out of all of the committees. What would be the student involvement? What would be the community involvement? What is the parents' involvement? So we'll be working on that.
Good. Yes.
Because the committees are going to meet for the first time tomorrow, I don't know if this is a question or a request, but sort of about their mission. Are they going to specifically discuss other possible setups? Will K-6 be on the table as a realistic possibility? Will K-8? And if we're talking about keeping the current setup, I feel like this proposed move of the 5th grade looked at two different things. One was the potential benefits to 5th graders. Can we deliver those in the current system? Is that much more expensive? Is it logistically difficult or impossible? And the other benefit to this transition, I gather, would be to alleviate concerns with the 6th graders that exist right now. And I guess there I would also ask, could they be alleviated under the current setup by looping 6, 7, 8 instead of just 7, 8? Could you loop 5 and 6 in the current setup between the elementary and middle schools? So yeah, the overarching question is, what is the mission of these committees? Because I have been concerned that since they were set up when it seemed like this was not a proposal but something that was going to happen, there's a concern that these are still implementation committees. What are they really going to be looking at? What are they really going to be considering?
Each committee has a charge, and they can expand on their charge. They're going to have very specific tasks. A lot of the tasks are going to come out, they have questions that have been asked. There'll be information that they'll want to have additional resources and information collected, particularly like curriculum, infrastructure, what is our current enrollment. So they're going to be digging into some of those very specific things and come back with, again, the hope is that rolling that up or answering a lot of those questions that you just posed.
I guess I'm looking also for an assurance that we're not just going to see how realistic it is to do these things under the proposed K-4 and 5-8 setup, but that we would see how realistic they would be under the current setup under K-6. Could I request that would specifically be considered by these committees?
I think that's absolutely, if we're going to make a change, we ought to know what we're changing from, right? If we want to increase an opportunity, well, what would be the cost and the efforts to increase the opportunity if we did this or if we didn't do it? So I think that's part of the expectation of the report, is to have a baseline and what it would take to do what we're trying to do. Again, it's very specific here around also the social and emotional and the learning outcomes for students on their developmental age. So, that can't always be necessarily put to a metric, but we want to weigh all those options out. So
not just the feasibility of the one, but the feasibility of the many, including the current.
And we do have some historical data on that as well. We've as a district, we've had those resources and some of those opportunities in the past years, and we've obviously attrited those over a good number of years. So some of you may know that. So we do have some history of our past where we have put those in and taken them out, and what the effects have been.
So making it easier to consider what the costs would be, you mean?
Yeah, I think so. Again, although those costs are different then than they are now. So again, I'm hopeful we're going to have to, really work hard as a group of committees and ask a lot of the questions and receive a lot of the additional questions that will be coming in. So it's my hope that we can.
I think
conclusive.
for clarity's sake, though, my understanding is that this particular group of working teams is not going to be looking at the broader, what David referenced earlier was sort of the master planning. And the master planning, when it was done historically, looked at a lot of different configurations kind of at the time. And I know I had a chance to participate in those conversations, and it was a very broad community exchange. The circumstances are different today. There's a lot of pressures from City Center on our Rick Marcotte Elementary School and from the airport on Chamberlain. I know one of the reasons that David and I have stepped up meetings with the city is to really understand, not only to communicate what's going on within the school system in terms of how demographics are, for instance, changing the demand for services within the school system, but also to understand how investments in development, and a couple of developments were specifically identified in our conversations this week, the O'Brien development, which would impact attendance at Rick Marcotte Central School, and then a potential development on Shelburne Road that would impact attendance at Orchard School. So there are other variables that we haven't always had visibility to in the past. So the multiple configurations is likely to be addressed through sort of a second phase of master planning, and that would be the whole pre-K through 12 configuration. But I think what you're asking for, David has responded to, in that it's sort of the current K through 5 versus a 5 through 8 model. And if there were some, if I'm hearing it correctly, and I'm just paraphrasing a little bit, if there was some, through the working group's efforts, if there was some configuration that suggested a different configuration of the K through 8 in aggregate, that some of those findings might be introduced at the time. But I do think the focus is specific
Correct.
to current versus a 5 through 8 model. And I don't know if that answers your question, but I wanted to just manage expectations a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I think if that scope if the scope and the recommendations that come out go far beyond the very specific request of fifth grade proposal, then I think it would be likely that it needs to be a pause or a stop or a implementation to infuse that information into the master plan. And then that work would continue. So, I think that, again, this work is critical to informing our future. And so, again, I think it's right and appropriate to have the conversation, and I look forward to the feedback that comes from it.
Good. Yes.
Just to be clear, these committees are not implementation committees. These are discovery and recommendation.
These are working committees that are going to be charged with responding to the questions, coming up with, a recommendation, rolling up into a report and a recommendation on whether the proposed fifth grade move, given the set facts, makes sense to do or not.
And how much weight does that have in the decision?
Well, I'm going to read it, and I'm going to, along with my staff, be able to say, I don't want to say there's, out of X number of responses, if one's, not okay, I'm going to say go with it or not. It's going to really be based on the feedback that I'm getting, again, looking at through the lens of what's in the best interest of students based on what I'm receiving, and also I would say to our future. So I really am going to value the feedback that comes in. I may need additional clarity that rolls up into the steering committee final report, and I will share it right here with the board, and in that June timeframe. So,
Kathy, did you have a comment?
When you share it with the board, what
Can we hold
the
on
board
a
does?
second?
I'm sorry.
Kathy.
I just wanted to say, while I can't claim the institutional memory of Mr. Maradella, I think I can come fairly close. And I would just like to share the perspective of someone who's been in the district for 30+ years. And, there have been topics like this along the way that have come up. And obviously, any topic that impacts on parents and children is important, and people have very strong feelings about it. I remember being the chair of the study committee when I was a kindergarten teacher, when we were making the change from having a 2.5-hour kindergarten program to a longer program and then to a full day program. And I guess I just would share that, in the 30+ years that I've been here, the one thing that I think that I can say about the South Burlington School District is that they have always approached questions and topics like this very thoughtfully and in a very measured and careful manner. And, you know, and we take studies, we spend a year or more looking at the issue. At the end of the day, there will always be some people who would agree and others who disagree with the final determination that's made. But I think that it's always a very thoughtful process. And so I think that trusting the process is kind of an important thing to keep in mind, because ultimately we probably could go out and find research that would support every configuration, that would show us very successful models of every configuration. And so at the end of the day, I think the question becomes, how well do you implement it? And so, you know, whatever it is that we decide at the end of this path, I think the question will really be that we take the time to do it well.
I apologize. So, but my question, and point taken, and you're absolutely right. You know, and there have been lots of conversations around, if this goes forward, by God, the parents will make it happen in a positive manner. You know, so, and they're going to be behind you 100% if it happens. But they're going to fight you tooth and nail anytime. So, but my question was, so you bring the report to you folks, and then what do you do with it? So what happens with the report then?
You know, we're really getting the cart before the horse. We're going to wait for the report.
I'm not putting the cart before the horse. The cart before the horse is, where's the big picture plan? But when you get it, then, but how generally what happens?
The board will do what it does with every issue, which is we listen, we deliberate, we weigh the angles, we'll listen to the public. As Kathy said, my experience has also been it is a really deliberate and thoughtful process. I know the board's looking forward to hearing the output of the committees.
I guess my question, more direct question, Elizabeth, was, does the board make the final decision? Is that how or does David make the final decision?
We look to administration to make recommendations, but the board weighs in with all of the concerns and questions, and if there's follow-up work required. If I's are not dotted, T's are not crossed, you know, I mean, David's well aware. You know, he and his team are asked to go back sometimes and do some additional work. You know, we really do look to administrators to make strong recommendations based on the best interests of our students. So it's not to say, I mean, I can give you several examples where the board has fallen on one side or another of an issue, and it's you know, peppered itself out with dialogue.
I hope that didn't sound like I was questioning the abilities or, you know, the good intentions of the administrators or the board. I'm just curious how. Yeah,
I mean, if it's a process question, I mean, that's what you should expect to see. That's what the public should expect to see.
And I think the other thing is, it's not going to just, you know, like June 1 report. You know, there's. Again, it's on the agenda tonight. You know, we have other things that we have on a reoccurring basis. I think that will be, you know, my intentions to kind of keep that discussion going. I think the board always is open to these meetings where feedback can be received. I don't see that it's just going to be like they haven't heard any progress along the way. Come to June, I do a report, and they, you know, there's a, you know, this board is much more involved, and I want them to be involved in understanding. You know, this is an important move that I you know, I believe it needs to be shared and communicated effectively. So I'm working to try to do that.
Good. I'll take one more question. One more question.
Yeah, another question.
Go ahead.
I think it would be helpful for you to tell all the parents that the website exists. So the Orchard PTO has been trying to get out, but I don't have access to everybody's email. You guys have better access. And people have no idea that it's out there. So I think, and not everybody goes. I go to the website every day because I got to get to middle school to read the daily announcements. But not everybody does. So it would be helpful if you could let people know that website exists.
These are some of the, you know, again, I've got that down. Those are some of the questions that we'll have, you know, around communicating, informing, keeping people up to date, frequently asked questions, responding. How we're going to do that and manage that is a big part of our first kickoff tomorrow. Yeah.
Can I just add something from what Elizabeth said as well regarding what the board's role is, and as I understand it, just to make very clear, we'll get a recommendation from the administration, and generally speaking, our role is not to rethink and redo the whole thing. We defer to a rational decision. We may individually, may not agree with certain points of it, but if it's a rational decision, if it's well supported, if it's gone through an appropriate process, it will take a lot for us to second guess the administration's decision. We still do. We're looking, in the appropriate situation, if the I's are not dotted, the T's are not crossed, the process wasn't followed, or it's an irrational decision, we'll step in. But I just want to make it very clear that we're kind of sitting in review of this recommendation. We're not, making the decision, in the first instance, if that makes sense.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to our next agenda topic, and I don't know if you want to introduce, or Kathy, would you like to?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Kathy.
Great.
I am happy to introduce Darren Allen this evening, and thank you for inviting us to come and give you some information about the Vermont TEL survey. I can give a little bit of background. About 8 to 10 years ago, the first TEL survey was conducted, and it was based on some professional development that had occurred in, I think, Michigan or Ohio. And what happened was that the teachers in that state thought that if they understood more about the learning and working conditions within their school systems, they could more effectively address professional development opportunities and how to improve the conditions in their schools. And so that was where the survey had its origination. It then went to the national NEA level and became a nationwide survey, which Vermont participated in for the first time, I think about
2009?
Yeah, and then there was the second version, which was last year. South Burlington had an incredible participation rate, one of the highest in the state. We had about 96% of our teachers and support staff that completed the survey, so that's a pretty extraordinary number. And so now the job is to make sense of all of the data, and Darren is here tonight to kind of give us a little bit of a microscope into what our next steps might be to do that. So thank you for having us here, and I'm going to turn over to Darren Allen, the Communications Director for Vermont NEA.
Thanks, Kathy. Thank you, Chairwoman Fitzgerald, Superintendent Young, the board, South Burlington, for putting up with me. I've got, these are the detailed results. I'd ask you not to really pour into them right now. What I intend to do is kind of explain the process, explain the theory behind the survey, explain what it does do, what it doesn't do, and then talk a little bit about how to use the information. So here's, I think, one for each of you, and there's some for the public if you're so inclined. The survey is administered pretty much the same in every state, and it's done by an outfit called the New Teacher Center, which started at the University of California, Santa Cruz. It's now an independent group that this is pretty much their big project. And it started in states without collective bargaining as a way to allow school boards and state legislatures to kind of hear from their teachers without the formalized process of collective bargaining. In Vermont, it's a little different. Obviously, we have collective bargaining. Every district meets with their teachers on a regular basis, and they talk about significant issues at the bargaining table. But the way we thought that this would be useful in Vermont was to actually take it away from the necessarily adversarial, by design, collective bargaining process and into more of a collaborative process. So what happened is every educator, licensed, and Vermont's the only state that does this, the support staff, the non-licensed people, and also building level administrators, regardless of whether or not they're members of the union, were given anonymous access codes, and they had a period of time over the spring where they could go online in a secured environment, only one chance to participate. They couldn't stuff the ballot box, as it were. And it's about it was about a 20-minute survey, and it asked them all kinds of questions. Asked them about, do they have enough time to do their jobs? Do they feel that they can collaborate with colleagues? Do they feel that they're connecting with their students? Do they feel like they have the materials necessary to do their jobs? Things like that, essentially getting at the teaching conditions in the school. Because the theory behind the people who developed this survey is that to have effective learning, the people providing the learning have to be able to feel they're in a safe environment, in a supportive environment. I'm not going to go over the specific in detail, but South Burlington has, in the main, constructed an environment where teachers and support staff feel they can do their jobs. They feel that, for the most part, they have sufficient materials, they have sufficient resources, they have sufficient time to do their jobs well. And I think the results are borne out. I mean, you know, this is no secret. You have one of the best, if not the best, school systems in the state. And by definition, that means in the country. I don't say that to anybody else but you guys. But honestly, this is a district that works and works well. So there are areas that you'll see in the results in some buildings where there are some concerns that teachers and support staff have. And our hope with this doesn't become a hammer, that this doesn't become a way of saying, we aren't feeling like we're getting what we need in this area, so we're going to go and we're going to demand it from you. What we hope this is something that opens the eyes of both the educators and the administrators and go, you know what? Let's talk about how we can maybe make this better, or explain why, you know, it's this way for a reason. So that's the general theory behind this survey. You're modest. I think South Burlington, of any, and there's some one school districts, just one building districts, who approached 100%. But South Burlington, among the large school districts, you're far and away the best response rate. And that's, I think, a credit to the support that you all gave to this. There were some districts in the state where the superintendents and the school boards absolutely fought this and didn't want this, but this is not one of those districts. So one of the things that we do at the request of school boards, at local associations, is to present the results that I presented to you today. So that's the background. I had a snazzy slide presentation, but I don't see a thing to plug in.
You can.
I
can? I have it all set. If
Oh,
you'd like
really?
to use it,
Oh,
yes.
okay.
Oh, gee, we
We can go through a few things, and I can take up more of your time.
And I would just say, while they're getting that set up, that I think that this really represents one of the ways that the association and the administration really work together to make learning and teaching better in our school system. I mean, you know, we spend a lot of time seeing some of the places where we're at odds with one another, but there really, on a day-to-day basis, are many, many more places where we're working together and have the same goals in mind. And, you know, we really appreciated the fact that David, sent out the word that the surveys could be completed during faculty times, that, you know, that it was important to the administration to hear what teachers felt about, you know, the buildings that they came into every day. So that was, we really supported, we're really appreciative of that. So. And, you know, the good news is that by almost every measure, as with our academic measures, South Burlington is higher than the state averages. You know, when we look at the places that we might want to focus in, they really are almost relative to the areas where everyone is thoroughly satisfied. You know, what are the areas that we might focus on? So that's also a good news kind of thing. There are not really any areas that you would look at and say, wow, we have really got a problem here. So.
Okay, so is this good? Everyone can see? All right. I think I kind of went through most of this agenda before saying what the agenda was. You all have the data that you can look at your leisure. This is, of course, what I talked about, just some more detail into that. A 55% response rate is good. We needed a minimum of 40% to have it mean anything. So there were a few districts and a few buildings in the state that didn't reach that 40%. Well, I guess about a third, who don't have access to this, to the results from their schools. Every SU, at the SU level, everybody did more than 40%, and as I said, most of the districts were able to. So it is a useful tool. And also, as I mentioned, Vermont's the only state so far that has actually asked its non-licensed educators what they think. And that was something that Kathy was on a steering committee at the statewide union that demanded that be the case. And they developed a survey specifically for that. The first time we did this, we went it alone. The second time, we garnered the support of the governor and the support of the then Department of Education, now Agency of Education. Former Secretary Villaseca was a big promoter of this. We're the only state where we did not get the support on either iteration of the School Boards Association or the Principals Association or the Superintendents Association. That said, the vast majority of individual school boards were very supportive. The vast majority of superintendents were supportive, and we heard from lots of principals who wanted to let us know that they wanted this information because it could help them in the day-to-day management of their buildings without having to go through any formal process. So this is very intuitive, right? If conditions in the school are conducive to learning, then kids are going to have a better shot at learning. If employees are satisfied with their work, and it goes beyond salary and benefits, but satisfied with the ability to do their professional jobs, they're going to stick around. And you experience that here in South Burlington. There are teachers who stay here for their entire career, and that's been a source of pride for this district. That final point, I'm not so sure that's true now that I've written it. I think that principals and teachers probably, in the main, view working conditions pretty similarly. If it's working, that seems to be the name of the game. What I wanted to emphasize, this is not meant to be a hammer. It's not meant to be a club. And anyone who uses it like that, we will tell them no, that you're defeating the purpose. This is to get away from any sort of adversarial relationship. This is just another tool that collects the impressions of educators. And if you, from year to year, if this survey continues to be done, you can see if the areas of concern ceased being areas of concern, if the areas of strength remained areas of strength. So it's sort of a metric. And there are some schools, who are still in the, even though we're not officially in the No Child Left Behind land of punishment and then forced remediation and the hiring of consultants to come in and fix quote-unquote problem schools. One of the ways that this survey can be used, and a lot of schools that are in the needs improvement category and below have been able to use this to basically get out of that sort of designation. This is just, I think this is something you can find if you go online. It's very easy to find online. The website's in the materials I gave you. But just a little bit there. I think they're all pretty self-explanatory. I don't think I need to elaborate. This is what you'll see when you go onto the website. It's open to the public. So any parent, any teacher, any school board member, anybody can go to tellvermont.org and scroll down to their school and see what's what. As we mentioned, outstanding participation here. The Chamberlain and Tuttle at 100%, and the rest, near 90 and above. So obviously the educators in this district cared, and again, we're given the support and the time to do this. So the one thing you'll see in your materials, it gives a state average. On the website it lets you kind of compare apples to apples, and then you get district level and school district level results. I'm trying to see this. This allows. I'm sorry that I use the word strong, because again, what I want to emphasize, this is not. This survey is not a scientific poll. So strengths and weaknesses is just relative. Remember, these are the impressions of educators and, in many instances, administrators.
If I could just add that one of the really key understandings about it is that no one is saying that this is factual information, that it really is the perceptions of the people who are working in these buildings. Maybe you could come along and give evidence to the contrary. But if I walk into my building and I feel that I am supported by my school leadership team, then that's that will impact the way that I conduct myself through the day, if that is my perception. So it's just important to understand that we understand that these are people's perceptions of their work environment.
And this is one of those situations that, that actually goes to the difficulty of the issue of evaluation. An evaluation of something as subjective as teaching, and something as subjective on the teachers and the educators' part. Am I satisfied with my work? And this is just one tool. And again, our hope is that it is used collaboratively and it is not used as a weapon in any way, shape, or form. Again, just reiterating, this is meant to be away from any adversarial process. We know instinctively, but it hasn't been able to be shown with any concrete, factual proof. But at least there is some correlation, we think, between teaching conditions, student performance, and those sorts of things. In the main, in schools where the educators feel that they have great working conditions, great teaching conditions, their student achievement tends to be good and better than other schools. They may not have as good of a perception of their educators who teach there. This is just sort of a little bit about when you look at your detailed reports, and again, it just gives you an idea of the range and the types of answers they could give. When you go online, and also when you go into your materials, this is the way the material is presented. So you can see those comparisons and see how they work. I purposely didn't want to put in the slides the specific results from here in South Burlington, because I don't want to take your time to delve into that. And again, that's why I gave you the handouts to look at later. And that is a really quick summary of what Vermont Tell is all about. And I'm happy to answer questions and go from there.
The handout that you gave me, there's percentages listed on each of these. What is that percentage?
The percentages are the people who agree or disagree with a certain, let me just make sure.
Because I guess I was a little confused because the question is, strongly disagree, agree, and strongly agree. So which does this percentage reflect?
So some of them were broken out by the continuum. Like if you look at the bar graphs, they will show you what percentage of people strongly agree, disagree, but then there were some other, they aggregated it in some ways where they were just taking the people who fell on the agree side, either agree or strongly agree. And that was the percentage that you're looking at. So in those places where it breaks it down by Vermont and South Burlington, it's just, the percentage of people who fall into the agree category.
Plus strongly agree category.
Right.
I guess then I'm a little confused.
So it's not going to add up to 100%.
Yeah.
No, I understand that. No, that's not my. But I have one of the reports. I won't say what school it is, but on this report for just looking at the first, and I'm just trying to make sure I understand the data you're presenting. On the report, class sizes are reasonable such that the teachers have the time available to meet the needs of all students. Just using that as an example. This one school, when I look at the report with the bar graph, there's 11% who strongly disagree and 68% who disagree. And on this graph, the particular school, well, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's central school. This is data that's out there. It's not like it's secret. And so there's actually, from what I read on this document, it says 79% either disagree or strongly disagree that the class sizes are reasonable. And I look on this document and it says 89.3%. And I'm just trying to figure out what I'm looking at. I'm trying to figure out if...
I apologize. I am finding...
Yeah, I should just tell you, full disclosure, I made the mistake last week of asking for the hard copy of the study. And so each of us, I had to split it up.
You already seen it.
Yeah, we've seen it.
We've kind of...
seen one school. Let me apologize in advance. This is... I didn't prepare this. I had the person who is the honcho of the survey. And this is why it's confusing. And I'm going to have to find out the answer to this question. Because it says, please rate how strongly you agree or disagree. they're diametrically opposed and you can't combine the two.
Right.
So I'm assuming this is how strongly you agree is going to be here, but I'm even,
But that's not
you're even
what that-
suggesting it's not matching up the numbers.
Right,
There are
right.
several cases where it doesn't match up.
You know, so I am going to pledge by tomorrow to email to David, a version of this that makes some sense. And my apologies.
So in
If
particular,
I could speak to a couple of places where I do know that there were some confusing numbers. The data that was based on the number of employees per building, and sometimes that number was not entirely accurate, so two things happened. One was that if someone attended more than one building, they might have gotten registered at the wrong building, and that skewed the percentages a little bit. So I know at one point, Chamberlain, I had to call Vermont NEA because I said, Chamberlain's results just went to 101%. You know, how can that be? Well, it was because someone who splits their time between two buildings answered in Chamberlain's building. So that was one thing that kind of made the numbers go a little funny. And then there was also just the fact that sometimes the numbers were not entirely accurate. And so it was based on that. We would then call and ask for another survey. And it was my experience that there wasn't like a good process for having them then adjust the number. So that if I called and said, Central School's numbers are off by 2, they need 2 more surveys, that didn't get adjusted on the totals, and so that also kind of skewed the number a little bit. So there were, you know, a couple of funny little squirrely things like that happened.
And again, this is obviously how the question is worded on the survey. The agree or disagree. I'm going to take the leap here. You know, I was a reporter. I wasn't a math guy, but I'm going to take the leap that the numbers we see here are those who agree with the statement. Strongly agree, or agree.
Which doesn't match up with.
It doesn't match up with that, and I'm going to get to the bottom of that. But
there are two parts to that hard copy thing that don't agree with each other. There's the bar graphs, and then there's the data numbers, and they don't agree with each other at the school level. They appear to agree at the district level and above, but there's some problems at the school level.
So what I will do, I think, as a general tool.
I mean, it's great data. We'd just like to understand which numbers we should be looking at.
And that is one thing that this is one thing that I absolutely can say that the person who heads this effort up would be happy if you want to dig deeply with someone who understands this.
I'd be happy to point out to them the problem I saw, so just let me know who I should talk to.
And that's one of the things, but one of the things we want you to know, that I'm here today to say that this is something we'll work with you with.
Great.
You know, we'll bring our professional development director in to come in and work with you.
I personally think it's a super effort, and I think we should welcome the data and try to figure out what it means and how to become better as a result of it, that's all.
Well, it's good to hear, it's good to hear.
There are also, I gave Stuart some forms. There are some nice templates that have been made as an outgrowth of the survey that can be used as, you know, if you want to drill down to a certain item in your building and say, you know, this is something we'd like to focus on. It kind of gives you a pattern for how to build that into an action plan within your building. So that's kind of a nice.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
There's boxes that are highlighted here. Is there an intent?
The boxes that are highlighted are just simply to show those instances where the favorability rating, the agree or strongly agree rating is lower than the state average.
Lower than the state average. Okay.
Which may mean absolutely nothing, or maybe something that you need to look at.
Okay.
I guess I have another question. Maybe I haven't poured through all of this yet, but maybe you can direct me to this. I understand this is perceptions and it's work environment and such, but there is a fixed amount of money that we can have to put towards such things. And is there anywhere in here where there's a setting of priorities? Like, it's more important that I have more time to collaborate with my colleagues than it is to, I don't know, eat lunch. I don't know what they would be, but I mean, there's several things here.
And I think if we dug and tried to extrapolate, we might be able to find that, but there was never a purposeful intent to say, if you can have only one thing, what's the most important thing to you? you know, this is not designed to extract money from school districts. This is designed.
No, I'm not
and
saying
I-
that.
no,
It's
no, what I'm
a
saying is
matter of trade-offs.
Oh, there's
Trade-offs
you're
have to be
absolutely
made,
right,
and
you know.
if there was some setting of what our staff and teachers are seeing as priorities, that certainly helps the administration, which leads to a budget, which leads to us. So but that's not, I'm not missing that.
No,
It's
you're not
in
missing
there.
it. It may, you know, we can talk to the new teacher center. They may be able to extrapolate that somehow, just with the way that that they've constructed the survey instrument. But there's nothing that's obvious. You're not missing something that's just obviously there. But that to me seems like a really reasonable and important question to answer.
And we really do welcome any of those kinds of concerns about it, because we have brought those as well. I mean, as the survey was unfolding, you know, I was making phone calls to Vermont NEA almost every day saying, well, what about this? What about this? Why is this happening? You know, so we really want it to be a completely transparent process, and if there are glitches in it, we want to identify them, and so we really do welcome any of those things that you see, that you notice in it.
And again, I just want to reiterate, the point of this is to start a conversation outside of the regular, you know, process. This is to get building administrators to talk to their educators, building administrators to talk to the administration, the school board to have tools to ask questions. You know, just in those conversations, you know, this may be a bigger school district, but this is not a big place. You know, people still need to be able to talk to each other, and I think they still can talk to each other, particularly at a building level.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. Will the survey be repeated? Is there a
Well,
timing?
It costs money. Yeah, our intent, and we foot the vast majority of the bill. Our intent is that we will repeat it, I think, maybe in 2 years. I think that's the next timeline. Our current president and our current board is very supportive of this effort, and I think they'd like to keep doing it in perpetuity. I know the new teacher center would like it to keep it in perpetuity, and National NEA is very supportive. And the current governor is supportive, and the new secretary of education is also very supportive.
We also got some information about new teachers. If you notice, there's data on new teachers and whether they're feeling supported in terms of mentorship. And, you know, the ESP information, I think, is very significant for us to pay attention to relative to.
Yeah, I would add with that. I mean, even before, you know, you and Rich and I had conversations about bringing this to the board, because we do have a lot of survey instruments within our district that provide really meaningful information. And on one hand, you want to, you know, balance over surveying but with actionable items as well. But I know as a result of some of the preliminary work that the board had access to, I know I meet personally on a monthly basis with the leadership of all our collective bargaining units, but including support staff. And the feedback I've gotten is already the responses would be different to this survey based on just what's happened, really not because of those meetings, but because of what administration was doing anyway during the last 12 months or so, since the survey was administered. I'd be interested in understanding how have other districts or supervisory unions used the data? Do you have any anecdotal examples?
Anecdotally, as I said, some have just rejected it outright. You know, they don't care. To be quite blunt, most of them have been ambivalent to mildly supportive, and there are some who've actually used it in a way that I think that this board and this district are probably interested in actually starting those conversations, starting saying, what do we need to do? How do we get there? You know, there have been some uses where, and this hasn't happened here, but I think you may have read about some uses in Addison County where the educators were so fed up that they ended up ousting a principal. That's not how we wanted it to be used, but nonetheless, the results were, that was another 100% response district. And that one building, the disagrees were just overwhelming. I mean, it was a picture of a school, again, perception, where the principal and the teachers didn't see the same thing happening.
Well, it sounds like the timing of the survey was.
I think it was serendipitous more than anything else. But the vast majority of districts that have actually really used it have used it to start conversations, set goals to improve areas, and also to be able to say, look, there's nothing we can do about this. To Martin's question, this may take money. If we need 3 or 4 more people to do what you want to do, and we can't do that. So I think the most important use was the start of the discussion, and the ability to actually set some standards and goals to work toward.
Other questions? Yes. Just one quick question. We have a student in the Orchard School, and so we obviously pay particular interest there. And he will be part of the transition if that were to happen as well. He's in the 3rd grade. So, just curious, we're looking at our school leadership, question Q8BB. It says there's an atmosphere of trust and mutual respect in the school. Orchard scores dramatically low, almost similar to what you were saying. It sounds like Havant and Addison County, only at 2.8%. It's question 8, Q8.1, and it's question B, atmosphere of trust and mutual respect. I was just wondering if people could speak to that a little bit. It seems almost an anomaly.
One of the things the board, when we requested the survey, we specifically, did not want to get into individual school results. We really wanted to understand the survey. It's really up to building administrators to decide how they want to use the information at sort of the building level. So when you do get into some questions like that, it's really between the superintendent and the building administrator to understand what that might mean. And also there are other evaluation tools that might provide different information. But it's obviously looking at, I think all of us look at feedback and say, we have an expectation of all of our leadership and all of our staff as well of performing at a certain level. And if you get a piece of information, whether it's from an individual parent, whether it's from a board member, whether it's from an outside business entity, whatever it might be, you kind of go, wow, that's inconsistent with what I would have thought. And so it's really up to those folks to dig into it. I'm not sure this would be the right forum to.
The other thing is that I don't think you should rely on, just from what, I'm looking at data that is very inconsistent with what I'm seeing on here. Now, you can get this online. You can get this one online, and that's what you should probably do. I'm betting that 2.8% is not correct on here.
So low, dramatic.
And the other thing that I would say to just caution people about the school leadership issue is that the way that you define school leadership, I know that sometimes people looked at it and they thought of school leadership as being the principal. For the elementary schools, it's the principal. And that really wasn't the intent. So in any school building, what is the structure for leadership, for the leadership of the building? It might be teams of teachers who take the leadership role in order to advance certain initiatives and enhance professional development. So I just would caution people not to define the term school leadership as a single individual. That it's some people would.
Well, honestly, I would interpret it that way.
You know what? And and that's where I think I have to really come back to perception, because even the people filling out the survey. For some people, when they sat to fill out the survey, they did have an individual in mind. And for some people filling out the survey, it was a leadership team. So I think the important thing to pay attention to is that it's a talking point. It's a stepping off point. It's a place where you say, when we drill down, it looks like there are some concerns about school leadership in our building. So now we need to have a dialogue in our building. Are we talking about one individual who's at odds with where everybody else thinks that we're headed? Or are we saying we don't, as a staff, feel that we have a part in the leadership of the building? And so, it really is a place to look at that data and then dig a little deeper and have those conversations that will lead everyone to that better place. So
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, I would take from your comments, Kathy, too, those are key learnings already that might be in the next generation of the
We might see
survey.
when we administer it again,
Yeah.
that 2.8 doesn't stand.
Well, it's also an opportunity to sort of define ambiguous terms
Yep.
so that you're
Yep.
getting some consistent feedback. And I know, I didn't see any specific feedback on the school board, so I hope you'll include that.
Do you want us to ask that question?
I have to say, I really think it would have stood out to me
Yeah.
if that was in the rest of the data. I really think that's a mistake. Because I really think I would have remembered if there was that low a number anywhere.
They're all
So-
consistently low, though, in that category. So, but, which is interesting. But,
Yes.
You know, I'm sorry.
I'll just point out to you, in the data that I looked at for one of the schools, didn't happen to be Orchard, but one of the schools I looked at, there were a number of cases in which the number that got reported in one section was the complement of the data that was presented in another section. And that's what I was just asking Darren to get, if I could talk to somebody, get that sorted out. I think the basic data is there, I just think it's got a reporting issue in it. So if you do look at it, make sure you look at both parts of the data at this stage of the game, because they don't always track. In other words, if you took the two arithmetic values that were positive and tried to put them on the bar graph, you find out that actually the two arithmetic negative values were put on the bar graph as positive values. And it isn't done that way every time. It's done that way some of the time. So I just, rather than I think there's good basic underlying data, but I think there's a reporting issue that needs to get sorted out and before anybody reacts to any of it, okay?
And Dan's specific question, because I know he brought it up to me, was that there's a series of questions asked that's very common in a survey where you might say, are you dissatisfied with something? And it would say yes, and then the response would be, are you happy and want to stay on the job? And it would be yes. So it's not necessarily conflicting, but it's not necessarily actionable either. So at any rate, I think, it sounds like you've got some good learnings, and I think, I think the board was interested in getting an overview, really, because any feedback is good, and you start to uncover maybe where some of the thorns are, but it sounds like there might be another generation at some point.
That is our hope. That is our hope.
And we also have, we have a lot of other survey mechanisms that start to complement the feedback we get here and identify some themes that really become umbrella themes for the district as well.
I mean, but I think that the ultimate proof is in the pudding. I mean, you have a relatively low turnover, so it may not be the most mobile of professions, but if people are truly unhappy at what they're doing, they're not going to stick around for 10, 20, 30 years. I mean, if they do, I don't understand that psychology, but and again, this is a school district that, I suspect that if that number were entirely accurate, the 2.8%, I suspect that there'd be some quick action and conversations about, okay, how are we going to fix this?
Any other questions or comments?
I just have a question. Down the road, it'd be nice to understand what the administration is doing with the results. I mean, if that's in day-to-day or planning or whatever. If we can maybe put that in the future agenda items.
Again, thank you for taking the time. Thank you, Kathy, for orchestrating this presentation. It sounds like we've got some opportunities to reconcile some data.
Absolutely, and again, just give us a call.
We'd like to do that.
And we'll be happy to dig further through it with you.
So, Darren, can I just ask whether it would be wise for us to, since this document seems to have some inaccuracies,
It seems a little swirly, doesn't it?
that maybe
So,
we want to ask that you just
circulate
give
it?
them to us and
No, I'm keeping them.
I just don't want us getting, stuff out there that's really wildly inaccurate.
That would
So,
not be a good, I'd
But
gladly
you
give it back.
certainly can see it on the website, and I think that the information there is a little bit more reliable.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Dan. All right. We'll move on to agenda item number 10, administrative reports.
So, thank you, Elizabeth. I'm happy to have both Patrick and Jason Kushner here to talk about the Rowland Foundation. And, I've referenced I've referenced a lot about big picture and kind of the creative thinking and engagement of our students, and I mean, I think that is happening, you know, throughout our district, but I got to tell you, I think that we're really quite the leaders in this area around engaging our students in purposeful learning, and big picture is an area, and Jason has been a really important component to that, along with his staff and certainly the leadership of Patrick and his administration. So I welcome Patrick and Jason here this evening. So
Great.
Thank you both.
Thanks very much. I won't tell you about my scores, but I put about Patrick on my survey. No, I'm just joking. Actually, I was just talking with some people who work in another district close to here, and about how lucky I am to have Burke as my principal. So I feel very fortunate. And I don't remember what I put on the survey.
Driving? Somebody called it caddying this morning at staff meeting. You're the PowerPoint caddy.
You get paid pretty well.
Yeah.
So the Roland, in case you don't know, I'll just give a brief overview of the Roland Fellowship. And the Rolands are a Vermont-based family that give 5 fellowships to bring school transformation to schools all around Vermont. And they're in about their, I think, 6th year or 7th year of doing this. They give 5 fellowships of $100,000 to teachers in Vermont to really do like teacher and principal, like a teamwork between the two of them, like initiatives to life, to fruition. And it's a really amazing organization. There's a great network of folks. And so I put in a proposal last year to really create a culture of innovation in South Burlington High School. And so it's not a big picture. Specifically, they wouldn't give it to me just for big picture. It's really for South Burlington High School. And so I'll talk about a few initiatives that I've done with that, and then we'll talk about the transition of what Pat's doing. And so my fellowship has been creating a culture to bring innovation and really supporting staff in doing that. And then another focus has been how to do proficiencies, how to do proficiency-based graduation in South Burlington High School, which we do at Big Picture, and is part of the EQS, or Educational Quality Standards legislation. So it's coming down the pike, and we've been working on it. And that's really about where schools define what is the knowledge and skills and dispositions they want students to have, and then really making sure they have them. So a few of the things I've done with my time and with the money. So one of them, we just got back. I don't know if, how much you heard about, but we got back from the New York City Innovation Tour, which was awesome. It was spectacular. We're so lucky to have Diane on it. In fact, one of her suggestions for staff meeting is like share some of the feedback comments we got from participants, and I have too many to share here, but I'll share a few. So one person said, the trip opened my eyes to how many different approaches there are to education. This confirms why I love teaching even after 34 years. The South Burlington group was eclectic and fabulous, and as great as New York City was, I'm proud to be a rebel. The tour was awesome and inspiring. It gave me a vision for redesigning education in Vermont. And that was actually, we had a representative, that was from a representative from the Agency of Education who went along. We also had board member, we had administration, Pat and Lissa went. We also had teachers, community members, and we had 9 students. So it was a really neat mix. And also, I think there were 2 really strong, like we saw some amazing schools and some stuff that we could bring back about how to do performance-based assessment. And we were talking to some of the students at one of the schools, and they're like, you know, they so in New York they have the Regents exams, which you have to pass to graduate. And there's a group of schools that have this waiver from doing that, and they do these performance-based assessments instead of that. And we were talking to one of the schools, and the student said, like, and they call them PBATs. The student said, I love the PBATs, and they're way more challenging than the Regents exams. And they talk about how, like, oh yeah, I'm a good writer now. I do like 20 drafts of my writing for these things. So I think it really some great dispositions and some good learning for us. So that's one thing I've been working on. Also, I've been working with math and English to develop proficiencies. So that's been one of the projects. I'm also, so as we make this transition to proficiency-based graduation, it's a lot of work and a lot of learning for the teachers. And we have an amazing staff, and they work hard at it, but it's a lot of learning. And so as a way of like acknowledge that and then supporting the process, I'm working with UVM to develop a grad course so they can get credit and structured learning for that process. And then also the teachers will well, because at least they're getting grad credit for this work. And so we'll probably start offering that with math. We'll do it probably this June. I mean, it's been happening the whole year, but UVM has to have it over one block, so it's going to happen in June. And then one more of the major projects I've been working on, and I'm hoping you heard some about, is the community learning conversations and the neighborhood learning conversations, which some of you have been involved in and hosting, and those they've been really awesome. And it's really about a couple goals. One, helping to educate the community and the state about what South Burlington is doing, and like letting them know about our ENDS policy and the legislation coming down from Vermont and what South Burlington High School is doing. And then also, as part of what we need to do, is we're developing a new way of graduating, these proficiency-based graduation requirements. And we want to get community feedback and insights. And so, kind of the way I phrase it is like, we want to get build-in, we want to get their opinion early on, as opposed to trying to sell it to them and get buy-in. And what I've noticed is normally when we talk about graduating by proficiencies, like before people's eyes like glazed over and they don't even know what you're talking about, and then there's a lot of concern. And I feel like with these neighborhood learning conversations, like people have gotten really excited. There's been great energy. People are really thinking about what do we really want from our graduates. So it's been both educational and it's gotten people really excited about what's coming down the pike. So those have been great. And just a status, so I think we've had about 8 to 10 of those neighborhood learning conversations. And if you don't know what those are, that's where someone says, I want to host a neighborhood learning conversation. And they've been like 4 to 12 people in a living room or at school or in a coffee shop. And you get those people, and we provide snacks, facilitator, and a note taker. We run a whole discussion, and then we get that feedback and bring it back to the district. So I guess one of my requests, that's happening until March 19th. So my request for you all would be, if you're interested in hosting one or could help people who would want to host them, even if they're like in the business community or stuff like that, it's a great way to get input and get people involved in the schools. And then the final event is on March 20th, and I've been doing this in collaboration with PACT, and they've been awesome support of bringing people and volunteers. And so March 20th, the PACT dinner is going to be a community learning conversation. And that's where we're going to roll out the results from the neighborhood learning conversations and get feedback for next steps. And so we're doing that, and we're also getting some consultants from Colorado to help us develop that. So it's going to be an awesome event, and we'd love for as many of you can to be there. So.
Thanks. Do you have questions for Jason right now? I mean, I've got a little bit of a segue. This kind of segues into the second part of this. I'm kind of taking advantage of the fact that I've got your attention and that I'm on the agenda to continue some conversations that I've already brought to you before. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about the Innovation Tour 2, because I was going to put this in for Jason as part of his presentation, but I figured I would just kind of put it at the end, just to put in front of you exactly, or a little bit more information about, and I will email you this, or Delina can get you this PowerPoint too, so that you can look into these different entities that we visited. All of the schools, with the exception of Calhoun, are public secondary schools with no application process, so they're all heterogeneously grouped. All of New York City high schools are school choice. There's 5-borough choice. So, and there's extensive studies about these schools because, again, their alignment with proficiencies and their alignment with performance assessment was created in order to obtain a waiver from the Regent system, which is totally different than what the situation that Vermont's in. But because of that, they have high levels of external evaluators and assessors who come in to make sure that their model is as rigorous and as aligned with the Regents. And you can imagine it's a pretty political construct. We didn't pay a lot of attention to any of that because that political construct doesn't exist here, but we did pay a lot of attention to their really, really high level of skills in terms of creating performance-based assessments, working with students in that environment. And, speaking personally, and you can hit the next slide, I think. There's a picture of us. One of the great things about this tour, so to speak, was it really wasn't it wasn't really just a tour, because we had large blocks of time where we worked together as a team, the folks who went down there. So those are some on the left there you can't really see, but those are 3 of our students who were in the process of visiting one of the schools we were in, and you could see that, like, I think all 3 of them are writing something down. And so we kind of were given some really clear advice about what to write down, what to look for, where we were, and then when we would come back together as big groups, we'd start in a big group, we'd break into small groups, and we came up with some actionable issues and items, and what's our next step in terms of some of our new learning on the tour. So it was really great. Diane, you want to add anything?
Well, it was so energizing and very exciting, and I just can't thank you enough for providing the opportunity for everybody that went on this. I think it was a great experience. There just isn't anything like seeing students engaged in their learning, with working on something relevant and being excited about it, and working, like Patrick said, then coming together and trying to process it and put it together, and what are some items that we can take back, what can inspire us to do something similar or different, so it's really great.
And so we came back with like 5 or 6 project plans that people worked on. That was our last session, was developing projects for South Burlington. And also, I don't think I've showed this to you, Pat, but I can. We have a website where we've posted like our tour, information links to all the schools, our readings we did to prepare, all our curriculum resources, and then Nissa, one of the teachers who went on, and a couple of students are working on a movie, so we can share some learning in multiple ways.
So this PowerPoint presentation will look a little familiar, because I gave this presentation in August, maybe September, and talked about educational quality standards, and a lot of that was kind of like a heads up, here's what's coming, here's where we are relative to EQS and Act 77, which is another piece of legislation that's going to affect us. But I just wanted to take a moment to show you folks how this, Roland's work, or Jason's work through Roland, is really like giving us the capacity to do this right. And so that's really what the Roland family's vision is that to allow for practitioners to kind of step away from the job, increase capacity in schools. And anybody who's worked in business will tell you, like, especially in innovative businesses, the percentage of resources that are put into R&D is pretty significant. And if you look at schools, there really are no resources put into R&D. And so we always kind of joke about like changing the wheels on the bus while it's moving, and refueling the plane in flight, and all those kind of things. And so Roland has recognized that capacity issue and created these fellowships to try to address that. So, and it is a partnership between the school principal and the fellow. And so for me, it's been really fantastic to have Jason's colleagueship. From like a transactional standpoint, like setting all this up was really fantastic, but also just from a transformational standpoint, because he brings a wealth of knowledge and resources and connections, and so it's been everything I thought it would be and more. And the really fantastic news is that we just were informed that we're one of the first schools ever, and maybe the first school ever, to receive a Roland 2 years in a row, because John Painter was just named a Roland Fellow for next year, and that's a pretty fantastic honor for the school, and of course for Mr. Painter also. So we celebrated that this morning at staff meeting, and John, of course, is home like really sick, so he didn't get to get like a pat on the back from his colleagues, but we applauded him in his absence. So anyway, this is a slide that you've seen before. We can kind of cruise through it. It just talks about the new EQS and how proficiency-based academic progression and graduation standards are the expectation. EQS has the power of law. So you can hit the next slide. So that's all information from the last. The only thing that's changed on this slide is that I said it's anticipated will be adopted this year. Well, they passed. And so that's the same information from my August presentation, but just to update you that they're no longer on step 7. They went through statewide public comment. They went through rulemaking, all those kinds of bureaucratic procedures, and now they are, they've passed. So, yes?
Question. Can you talk about how all of this fits into the ends?
Yes, that's where I'm going. Thanks. Well timed. Next. So the top paragraph there is a definition, cut and paste, straight out of EQS, which talks about what proficiency-based learning is. And I know you're familiar with that because I've already given that presentation. The clarifying paragraphs underneath are some information that I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood. And that is that proficiency-based learning does not presume that grading as a measure of achievement is obsolete or going away. And so South Burlington High School students are going to continue to earn grades in courses, but it is safe to say that as we become more proficiency-based and as our proficiencies start to take center stage, the data behind the students' grades is going to become a lot more detailed and less imperfect. I mean, one of the things that I always talk about with grades is that grades are inherently imperfect. And the other issue with grades is, in theory, you could look at a grade and say like C, and that tells you absolutely nothing about what a student knows or can do, or it's a compilation of things, or is it not, or one teacher counts something that another teacher doesn't count. So what moving towards a more proficiency-based model will do is make grades less imperfect. I mean, there's really no grading system that will be perfect in every way, but we are striving to make our assessment and the way that we report what students know and can do more accurate. And so, and the last paragraph is the whole, it's quite conceivable that a D- will no longer move a student towards meeting a graduation requirement. And when we, I took a slide out, but at one point I talked about our current graduation requirements are a D- in 20 credits of classes, you know what I mean, which really tells you nothing about what students necessarily know and can do. So, yeah, there it is right there. Originally I had kind of a tongue-in-cheek, the successful completion, i.e. D- or better of 20 Carnegie units. But the new local graduation policy must define proficiency-based graduation requirements. So next. This is a definition of what proficiency-based graduation requirements are. The blue text in this PowerPoint, that's hyperlinked, so there's some resources for the board there. Next. Okay, so what does this mean for SBHS? And this goes right to what Diane was talking about. So we are fortunate to have the following in place: ENDS policies, SB6 and SB5, a mapped curriculum, and our adoption of college and career readiness standards along with the rest of Vermont. So those are Common Core standards. I couldn't brand the SBNs, but so I gave you those little stick figures crossing the finish line, cool. Like that? Yeah. So I don't know that I haven't copyrighted that yet, but. So logical next steps, and this is where this is where we're headed, and that's to use data from the community learning conversations, the SB5 and the SB6, the ENDS, the curriculum and content standards to begin a community-wide conversation about South Burlington High School's new graduation standards. So logical next steps part 2. We need to establish 5 to 8 cross-curricular graduation standards. And the cross-curricular graduation standards will be drawn from the ENDS, the community learning conversations, the Common Core state standards, the Common Core state anchor standards, which are cross-curricular in nature, the SB5, the SB6, et cetera. So cross-curricular graduation standards tend to be knowledge and skills that are mostly skills that apply across the program. Then there'll be content-specific graduation standards, which will be about 5 to 8 per content area, and those are drawn from Common Core state standards, Next Generation Science standards, college and other college and career readiness standards that either Vermont or South Burlington specifically has adopted. We'll then have to develop indicators of performance for grades 9 and 10 and 11 and 12, and the indicator for performance for grade 11 and 12 will be the graduation standard. And then we'll attach performance assessments of these standards to courses and perhaps experiences, and I'll expand on that in a minute, the experience part. But we will attach performance assessments of these standards to specific courses within the program. And then we have to advise students and parents regarding pathways to meet the new graduation standards. So that's kind of our first hard deadline, is that 9th grade class that's going to come in and say, what do I need to, where am I going to get a diploma? You know, and right now it's pretty easy for a ninth grader because you just kind of say, well, you need 4 years of English and 3 years of science and you know, credit of this and a credit of that and a bunch of elective credit, and then we give you a diploma. And so we're going to try to make sure that we can package this in a way that is as easy to understand as that. And I'm aware that with, can you put that back up? Sure. That with you know, with all new learning comes language acquisition, and so we're going to try really hard to make sure that we don't, you know, jargonify our graduation standards in a way that, you know, probably once upon a time people didn't understand what credits and Carnegie units were, and that's just become part of our vernacular. But we have to be really careful to make sure we do a good job explaining to kids and families exactly how they're going to move towards graduation. And then finally, a logical next step for us would be create systems to incent and or allow flexibility as students move towards those graduation standards. And when I talked about attaching performance assessment of standards to courses and perhaps experiences, that may be, depending upon some of our cross-curricular standards, there may be common experiences that we want all students to have, and that there's a lot of discussion right now that's come out of our school climate committee about the statistically significant difference in school affiliation between students who are involved in co-curriculars and athletics and students who are not. So we're starting to talk about, well, if we see that as a noticeable gap, then shouldn't we be talking about all students being involved in activities and or athletics? And so if we were to aspire to that truly and attach it to a graduation standard, then there may be an experience, not necessarily a course and a performance assessment, that's connected to one of our graduation standards. And so that's what I meant by perhaps experiences. I think that's in play. I think that's the last slide, right? It is the last slide. So that's how I took the Roland update on the school board agenda and morphed it into our yeah. But you know, the Roland trip really, and seeing what they do at the New York Performance Assessment Consortium schools on the classroom level really helped myself and the teachers who were there understand how this could work for us. And I think, you know, I think those were conversations we had, you know, down and back. And down, on the way down, they were a little tense. I was like, I don't know what this is going to be like. And on the way back, they were like, we can do this. We are completely ready to move in this direction, both at the classroom level and I think at the district level. So ask me questions.
It's current 7th graders that will graduate by proficiency. Is that
I think it's 6th.
Current 6th
Yeah,
graders.
2020 is 6th, but you know, yeah, I know that 6th grade is 2020, and I've read EQS a couple times, and I'm just going to call down to Montpelier and say, just tell me who the graduating class is, because it's confusing the way they set the deadline.
I thought it was 2019.
I thought it was 2019 also, but then my son's 2019, and my son's principal said, oh no, he's the last one that goes through on the old system. Because I said, oh, he's going to be the first one that goes through on the new one. He said, no. So then I thought,
And also, when we put our 2020 plan, before the state passed this, we had the deadline of 19, so that you might have seen it in our document, whether we'll make it or not, you know. I mean,
and
that's the
nothing would
discussion.
preclude us from doing it, just so you know. There's nothing would preclude us from having 2019 be a class that graduates based on the new graduation requirements versus the old graduation requirements. And one of the things that's really helpful with this kind of discussion, I find, is Jason uses a great metaphor about, this isn't like tearing your house down and building a new house. This is like remodeling your kitchen. And a lot of the big picture folks that I interact with all the time, as we're searching for perfection within the big picture model, a lot of people say, compared to what? And then you kind of take a step back and you look at what you're trying to do compared to what you currently do, and you're like, oh yeah, so this isn't perfect, but it's closer to perfect than that is. And so, for example, most people don't know, but graduation requirements were established by the presidents of like 6 universities in 1925 at one meeting in Boston. And it was just decided that high school kids in America needed, 4 years of English and 3 years of math. And actually they included like 2 years of Latin and all sorts of things that are no longer there. But the South Burlington graduation requirements, from what I can tell, were just, the state came out saying these are the minimum graduation requirements, and South Burlington said, okay. And then those were our graduation requirements. So as I'm imagining this really in-depth discussion about what our new graduation requirements are going to be, we've already done more than we did the first time we set the graduation requirements, which have changed once since I've been here for 16 years. And even that change was an addition of basically it made algebra a required math class. So it was 3 years of math, one had to be algebra. Sorry, so other questions?
So I have a question. So I went to one of these community learning things on Sunday night, and we talked about this, and we talked about how in big picture you don't give grades, and this is kind of, you're already doing this, but you're talking about giving grades. So how do you change your system, you know what I mean, to be able to give grades on that basis?
Oh, well, you can operate in a proficiency-based model and still give grades, like point-in-time grades based upon a number
assessments.
of different, number of different assessments.
Okay.
Sure. And there are big picture schools that give grades.
Yeah.
There's a number of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I think it's sometimes the subject gets collapsed when we have, because I think we had a big picture person facilitating.
Yeah.
Then people think, oh, you're talking about the whole school being a big picture, like all South Burlington High, which is not true.
That was the perception I got.
Yeah, and it's not true.
Okay.
We're not sure how to separate those.
Okay.
But yeah, it's like South Burlington High School is on its own path, kind of distinct from the big picture.
Okay.
So.
And big picture would represent one of those flexible pathways that students could take towards these graduation standards. So, and big picture would, in 2025, hopefully be one of a number of flexible pathways that students could use to move towards graduation standards. I mean, right now, students go to Center for Technology in Essex and study culinary, and they're moving towards our graduation requirements, and they can go to the Burlington Technical Center and study automotive, and they're moving towards our graduation requirements. So we already have these, same thing, we have these multiple pathways. We create embedded credits within those programs and courses to kind of appease the Carnegie unit system. But so I expect things like that will remain the same, but actually will become more authentic and better reflect what students know and can do. I can give you another example of something of a phase-out practice that I think that I feel pretty good about. So right now you can go through grades 9 and 10. You'll take humanities and American studies, and let's say, for example, you're not an excellent writer, and you kind of know it because you do your writing's hard for you, and when there's a writing assignment, maybe it's your kneecap, maybe it's your SAT. You just kind of know you're not a great writer. Junior and senior year, poetry, public speaking, let me see, another non-writing heavy, contemporary issues, and words, right? So I just picked 4 classes that are not writing intensive, and I'm going to graduate. And so under a proficiency-based model, if you come out of your sophomore year with your 9-10 performance indicator indicating that you're not, you need some support in writing, or even if you don't, you're going to have to take an 11th, 12th grade class that has a writing performance assessment affiliated with it in order to graduate. You're not going to be able to just take 4 years of English in order to graduate. So I feel pretty good about that because I feel like there's some real integrity to a system that really says these are the things we want kids to know and be able to do, and guess what? We're going to make sure they know them and can do them. And as I've said before, I think these are just logical next steps for us. And
can I add one more thing about big picture? That I think one of the advantages of big picture is like I hate to use the word radical, but very innovative in how they're doing stuff. And I think kind of the advantage of us kind of pushing those boundaries that way is not that we expect the larger high school to go that far, but like we were the first to do one-to-one laptops.
Mm-hmm.
We made a lot of mistakes. We made those changes, but then that helped advise some of the things so we could better do one-to-one with the larger high school. I think same thing, we're on our like third or fourth iteration of our proficiencies. We've made some mistakes and we want to share both our successes and our mistakes. And I think, you know, having big picture, try these things on a smaller scale, and being able to rapidly prototype them
Mm-hmm.
can really produce great learning that then the larger high school can learn from.
I want to know who won the girls' basketball playoff game.
You don't know?
No, I figured I'd away from the Twitter second, you know. So.
I'm sure you my game because I totally missed that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick and Jason.
Thanks a
That's
lot.
exciting work. Appreciate it.
So we're on to talking about.
Yeah, what is up with that?
I know.
Did I get a mileage deduction or something?
Well, I did do something good when we did have the snow day. I did make sure about giving an early call to you, right?
Yeah, but that was at 5 o'clock at night.
Yes.
I already figured it out when I got home.
When you travel.
But yes, you did.
Yeah.
I was very happy. I was
So-
waiting for the 4 a.m. call.
Rhonda is here and John is obviously, they both worked together to put this together. I apologize that it got to you last, so you haven't had any read time at all. So let me allow both John and Rhonda to kind of walk through the report for you and then solicit questions that you might have. So, John, thank you.
I apologize. It's Rhonda had her part done a week ago, and we're trying to wrap up budget and that kind of thing. So just get that straight. But I think Rhonda should talk about the status, things that have been accomplished, and just talk about them now.
Okay, basically at the very beginning, you guys, we had decided that two of the areas that we could really concentrate on were adult participation and breakfast, and I think we're doing very, very well there. In fact, you know, we apologize, we did the numbers again and not the beautiful graph. We kind of ran out of time. I was like, he's gonna be mad at me, there's no graph on here. I knew you would miss the graph. We'll have one for you next month. So we're doing really well there. We are continuing to see growth. Lunch participation district-wide is up about 13%. I was hoping there would be growth at the lunch level, but hadn't really pushed for that. The staff really wasn't ready. Breakfast and adult participation is a little bit easier to control. So I'm happy with the fact that district-wide we're up 13% at lunch. There are two elementary schools that consistently, month to month, are down a little bit. Orchard is usually between 3% and 8%, and Chamberlain usually goes between 9% and 12%. Started to concern me a couple of months ago. We have a new staff member in charge at Chamberlain who is top-notch, does a lot of her own homemade stuff, so I did a little checking. Enrollment's down. I think Chamberlain is down 18 students and Orchard is down 15 students from last year. So, you know, I looked at that and I said, you know, the one thing about comparing last year to this year is that even though you're comparing months, you're not necessarily comparing apples to apples. There's not the same number of days. The enrollment changes. The type of enrollment changes. If your free and reduced percentage goes up, then you would expect the lunch meals would go up. If it goes down, then you would expect it to go down a little bit, because free and reduced, you should hit those percentages every month at lunch. You should well exceed them. So I did put a lot of work into trying to figure out why, because I just needed to know that that I wasn't doing something wrong. So, you know, we're making a lot of progress in the elementary schools. Original goal was to stop having this school be a central production kitchen and actually send the food to the little schools to be served, in some cases, an hour and a half later. To me, that's serving leftovers. We had most of the equipment we needed in the schools to get the job done there, with support in some cases from us. And we're really close. The staff is working hard. We have the equipment. should be in, most of it will be in by the end of March. That was paid for through the Common Roots Grant. And they are now talking with us about what we need for next year, so I'm really excited about getting more, some newer equipment. And now, we're moving into the training phase with the girls. We're gearing up and trying to look at the implications on, if you do choose to move the 5th graders, how that's going to impact this department, how we're going to make it happen here, because that'll make the middle school about the same size as the high school, and how it's going to impact the lunch times and the staffing and financially and staff-wise. We've looked at that. In January, I did something really funky, and it actually came out okay because the numbers look really good. I ran 5 new menu items that came out of the new school cuisine cookbook, which is done by the School Nutrition Association, Vermont Feed, the USDA, and other school professionals, cooks, with the farm to school movement behind it. So they're all very nutritious. They all meet the new requirements. They're all supposed, local produce, fresher. And I put 5, not 1, but 5 menu items in January. That can make or break a month. And I knew it when I did it. I wanted to test customer loyalty. There comes a point where you need to test that to see if they're willing to trust you, if they've liked what you've served, and they're willing to trust you and see whether or not the numbers dropped. Peanut butter and jelly sales did go up a little bit, okay? But what we did was we overproduced those things, and it was all things that, had I worded it differently, like if I'd put mac and cheese with kale, it wouldn't have been an issue, because mac and cheese was in there and they would have forgotten the kale, but it was cheesy kale bake, and that was the name in the book, and I wanted to stay true to that. We did a chicken enchilada bake because we're trying to introduce more cultural foods. We could have called it Mexican lasagna, and it would have made a huge difference. It's all in perception, like we were talking about earlier, especially when you're talking about perception in the elementary schools. Middle and high school, they'll try anything once. But the little kids, they don't always, an enchilada bake doesn't make sense to them, but lasagna they can associate with. So we overproduced, and a lot of kids got up there and looked at it and went, oh, we'll try that. And we'd give them a sample, and then kids that didn't want to try it, we let everybody sample it, so that next time, hopefully, the numbers will be up. But again, overall in January, they didn't hurt us. They didn't hurt us at all, because what you see on here is not January to January. You're seeing year to date so far, whereas I think the last months it always been, we've done month to month. But when I compared the numbers at the end of the month, I was like, okay, this was pretty good. So so we did that. We're now moving into like a training phase. We really need to train the girls a little bit more, and the SNA is sponsoring a training program, and it's various locations throughout the state. They're bringing in New England Culinary Institute students and staff, as well as other professionals. Kathy Anderson from another school district will be coming, and they're actually training hands-on other nutritional staff throughout the state. So they had an opening. They emailed me, I think 2 days ago, and said, one of the schools dropped out, would you be interested in hosting? And I'm like, yes, because all the trainings were over an hour away, and I couldn't get my staff there. It was just going to be too hard. So we're actually going to host one of those trainings here on March 5th. So that's going to be really exciting, and that training is geared around spicing it up. It's going to help them to understand flavor profiles and how to develop your own seasonings so that vegetables pop and things pop. And I think that's one thing that everybody, even if you can always learn something better from somebody else. So I'm really excited about, partnering with them to offer that here. And we expect, 20 to 30 people to come. So that's pretty exciting.
One of the things you've also addressed, and I think is important, is around kind of the training around, you're working hard again, even with Karen, and looking at job descriptions and creating more universal positions,
right,
and upping the training so that you have the ability to have folks go wherever you need them, as
right.
opposed to.
Yeah, that's something that we're definitely doing. We're working with South Burlington, we're doing like the kind of the good things, the status report. I've touched base with the recreation department here in South Burlington, and we're looking at, not this summer, we couldn't get it done, but next year, not only offering a summer food program, but also trying to institute educational classes where those kids actually will help to produce the food to feed the summer program. So in order to do a program like that, it's better to wait and do it right than kind of stab at it. I didn't want to put us in a position where we could possibly lose ground over the summer. I need to stay, with the momentum going forward, so we moved that back. Some of the challenges that you're going to see. The USDA guidelines for the school year 2014-2015 become even more restrictive. It'll have a major impact on our budget. No longer do we have the choice. Right now, the current guidelines with grains is 50% of the grains that you offer on a daily basis, and you have to offer them, you don't have a choice, have to be 51% or more whole grain rich. Next year, all the grains you offer have to be whole grain rich. Is it a bad thing? Not necessarily, but it's very costly. The difference between a case of regular penne pasta and a case of whole grain penne pasta is about $30. Right now, the way that I do my budgeting and make my menus is I figure out what it costs me to put it on the plate, and then I do the balancing act. So I can put the things like the lobster salad roll on the menu, and then follow it up with a pasta dish, which is traditionally a very profitable dish to put out there. It doesn't cost a lot to put it on the plate. It's no longer going to be the case. It's going to be a challenge for anybody in this position to make a menu work with the guidelines that they are imposing. The School Nutrition Association is lobbying to have them relax those requirements and give us a little bit more time. Just like 2 years ago, they did the 2 ounces of protein, and I thought every football player was going to pass out, kind of thing. Everybody complained so badly that in January they relaxed those, and they never went back to them. So SNA is trying to tell them that's exactly what's going to happen. You're going to have a bunch of people pull out of the National School Lunch Program. You're going to have lower participation rates. You're going to drive the costs up, and it's going to hurt a lot of schools. A lot of schools. We're fairly lucky. We have a very low percentage of free and reduced lunch participants. We're less than 20% district-wide. We can do things to compensate because most of the business that we get, over half of the business that we get is paid. So we can do things like look at different pricing structures for higher cost meals. We lose a little bit because we have to offer those to kids that are free and reduced. And we're still only going to get the $2.93 back regardless of what the price is. But we have more ways to lessen the impact than districts that, say Burlington, who are 60% free and reduced, and they get total reimbursement for every meal that they serve. They only get $2.93. That's all there is to it. That's all the government gives you. So it's going to be a challenge going forward. The salt, the sodium restrictions are ridiculous, and it's going to take a lot of the foods that we currently serve off the table. The new competitive food rules, which is everything that we serve in the snack bar, anything in a vending machine, those all go to the ridiculous next year, and it's going to make it really difficult. They've also implemented new professional standards. There's minimum training levels for all nutritional services staff and continuing education credits on a yearly basis, which we will have to pay for as part of employment. It's 8 hours of continuing education for just regular staff members, 12 hours for anybody that's in a supervisory capacity, and 15 to 20 hours for anybody that's a director, depending on the size of your district. So they just keep adding these things up with, that little 6 cents that they threw at us a couple of years ago. It really wasn't enough. Right now, as of today, we have not received any of the funds from the state. the state is supposed to pay the 40-cent portion of the reduced price meals. Nobody's gotten that money yet. So that is not reflected anywhere in any of our revenues. We think we're going to get it. We just don't know when. And
What's up with that, John?
We're working, we want to identify how much it's going to be first, so we can do accurate projection.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then-
we were hoping that we were getting, normally they used to do the breakfast matches because they always paid a portion for the reduced breakfast. They did that twice a year, and they usually did it at the end of December, so you got it in January, and then again in June at the end of the school year. And they call it the state match funds, and we've not seen any of it. And when I talked to Nancy Lewis at the state, when I went to a thing a couple of weeks ago, she said, we don't know.
So on the guidelines, for instance, the U.S. Department of Agriculture guidelines, is there not an adjustment to the reimbursement?
Absolutely not. Those are all things that they're just saying, these are the professional standards that you're going to have to meet.
Mandates.
Unfunded mandates.
It's already on our list.
Yeah, so we're working, like David had said, I've been working very hard with Karen and with the business office, with John and Sue. Right now, the way the department is set up, everybody has a specific memorandum of understanding, and they have their little job titles, and they're assigned to schools. And we really need to get away from that to make that work for the department. So everybody will become a district employee, and they will be moved at will. And needs of the department, and it's going to create some issues. I've been talking to the girls about it and doing the positive thing. The positive thing is it will make us stronger as a department. It will not be such a crisis if 3 people all have the flu on the same day. It will make us better. It's not going to happen like every day. I'm not going to just like randomly shift people. You're going to have basic assignments. But what happens now is, and I was looking, I don't have any control over the salaries or the benefits. That's one thing I haven't had control over yet. And I was kind of concerned because I think I sat before you at the beginning of the year and said we were going to save $100,000 to $130,000. I think I lied. So I didn't mean to, but this is why. I didn't understand the whole FMLA. If you have a sick partner and you're a full-time employee, then you can then go part-time, and then I have to pay somebody else to replace you, and then I got to find somebody to replace you. So, and then if you're out sick, because they have a tremendous amount of sick days, it costs a lot of money that I was not anticipating spending. And I have to apologize for that because I should have done a little bit more research on school districts, because in the real world, if you're out sick, you just don't get paid, so most people go to work. And those were just things that, not having been in a school district for a very long time, I didn't really understand how that worked. And quite honestly, we've had a lot of people out sick. I've had 3 employees this year that have been out for a month at a time. And that takes a big toll on we are making savings. I don't think it's going to be $100,000 like we thought, but we are making savings. But then I try to look at everything and adjust it with what I'm spending on food. So I think I'm very comfortable with where we're at. I'm happy that that's not red, that we are actually in a positive. There's a lot of money that we haven't gotten the state reimbursement. Some of the billing for the events have not been done. Some has, some hasn't. There's other factors that play in there. But I think overall, I'm very happy with where we're at. I'm very confident that we are going to meet the goal and break even. And I'm now really working very hard to make sure that we can continue that next year. And in March, I'll have a more detailed report for you as far as what the government's expecting and how I think it's going to impact us. So, questions?
Just a couple of questions.
Sure.
With respect to the sick leave and such, now, first of all, a comment that I prefer people who are doing the food who are sick not to come here. So I'm happy to pay. No, I know that.
No,
but
me
but,
too.
but,
Me too.
But on the other hand, if there's, do you have enough backup or ability to make sure that there's not abuse of the amount of sick leave that we provide?
No,
And
absolutely
can you remind me,
not.
David, is this in the staff contract or is this separate?
Support staff agreement, and they have the time outlined in their.
So
their
it's,
agreement.
this is they're in the support staff agreement under that, okay, all right, okay.
Yep.
All right.
It's just really, we're looking at the whole contract as it applies to nutritional services. Nutritional services is different than probably anything else that you do in a school district, like transportation. We're like a business. We're expected to break even and fund ourselves. But yet, we somehow get pulled into all of the other negotiating with unions and everything else. I have people that work 3.5 hours a day that get exactly the same benefits as people that work 8 hours a day, with the exception of the health insurance. So there doesn't seem to be any level. So you have a part-time person that works 180 hours a day, or 180 days a year, working 3 hours a day, and they get 20 sick days. They get all of the same days that full-time people get. And I have not, since the day we opened and started serving, had my entire staff at school on any day.
And how many employees are in the nutritional
23.
So a group of 23.
Not one day have I had every single employee there. And that's going to take some coaching on my part. I'm trying to get them to understand that they're valuable and it's necessary. I saw a thing on a bus where it said, we have too many employees, strive to be an asset. And that's what I'm trying to instill in them, value, that they have value and that when they're there, we produce better. And it's going to be a while to get that to where it needs to be.
I guess a suggestion, without getting into any details, can we have Rhonda talk to Karen about if there are certain things we may want to propose in the next negotiation round with respect to the nutritional services? At least to get some ideas.
We're already working on it.
Yeah, we're working on that.
I mean, this is again part of the move forward work that I have Karen doing, along with job descriptions, and so we're on that. I think there's certainly there's opportunities here to make some corrections sooner rather than later.
Changes, yeah. Any other questions?
Other questions?
I was just, it's more of a comment with more and more children that have, and adults as well, gluten allergies, and the requirement to have everything, whole grain. It was just.
Well, actually, when there's a food allergy, you can obviously compensate for that. Like if a child has a dairy allergy or is lactose intolerant, with a note from a doctor, I can give them juice. If they can have juice, So we've actually made a lot of adjustments to our menu, and we now label the menu every single month. It's color-coded for vegetarian, gluten-free, dairy-free I haven't color-coded yet, but we are moving towards that because we have a lot of those. And we're now offering gluten-free options. Taco day, you can have the hard corn taco, which is gluten-free, or the soft taco. We did a pasta buffet at all the elementary schools, and we brought in gluten-free pasta. I usually just, buy a small quantity, enough to serve maybe 20 people. That was very well received. So when we do breakfast for lunch, if we're having French toast, we'll make some with gluten-free bread on a separate thing. So we're really moving towards meeting those nutritional requirements as well. And I think we're making a lot of headway. Unfortunately, it opened up a can of worms because now everybody wants me to do all these different things. And we do have different, to me, vegetarianism is a choice. Gluten intolerance is, in fact, a disease. Peanut allergies are life-threatening. And so then we kind of make sure that we're following the tier of safety and trying to implement these. So by next year, I hope to be able to offer even more diverse food to meet different nutritional requirements for people.
I just wondered if it would be more challenging with the new guidelines that everything has to be?
No, because you are providing a specific food to people that have a disease, so you are allowed to do that. But to be honest with you, every gluten-free pasta I've seen is made from either quinoa or rice flour. It is a whole grain product, but it's even more expensive than the other. So, but yeah, I mean, there are some leniencies in those requirements, but like, we can't serve white bagels. We can't serve white pasta anymore. And whole grain doesn't necessarily mean whole wheat. There's a lot of organic whole wheat products that don't meet the nutritional requirements. They're not whole grain. So, you know, quinoa is whole grain, and, you know, the wheat berries are whole grain, but they're very expensive. Quinoa for a 25-pound bag is $133. Not something that you could really, we do use quinoa. We put it on the salad bar and stuff, but to be able to serve that as a grain to 1,600 meals a day, we couldn't afford to, because 25 pounds of quinoa isn't going to feed that many people. And so we're going to have to make some adjustments. We're going to have to really look at what we're serving next year. It's going to take a lot of time, but we'll get there.
Thank you, Rhonda.
All right, thank you. That's right.
It isn't raining, sleep quick.
Yeah.
Sleep quick, yes. Thank you for that.
All right, agenda item number 11, VSBA legislative update.
So, I know Martin has that on there, so I don't want to, I'm going to let you speak to it, but I did, there was a more recent legislative update, so I thought this is again shared by VSA and VSBA, so I just want to make sure that was also available. What I did, and again, I don't know, be quiet, but what I did is I looked at the current legislative update, and I kind of put it together with what we worked on in our draft, and kind of said, are there any parallels in efforts and messages that are working towards that end? And obviously, there's some things that are happening, but there's many that are not, and so that's. I just wanted to make sure you had that at your place. So, Martin.
Okay. I'll try to make this quick since we're a little behind. Just a couple things I wanted to mention about the Vermont School Boards Association, about what they've been up to in the last couple months in this legislative session. First of all, there was, as we all know, Governor Shumlin has made some comments suggesting which is fine, suggesting very careful scrutiny of budgets, essentially provoking or encouraging communities to vote down their school budgets, essentially trying to foist blame for where we are with respect to tax increases and such on school boards. And I know that Steve Dale of the School Boards Association has made some statements to counter that we're in this together. There's a lot of this has to do with things that are going on at the state that are outside of the school board's control. But really where the School Board Association is focusing now is kind of interesting, and perhaps different, but I haven't been on there for that long to know. There's a strong push is being sensed in the legislature this year to deal with the statewide governance system, specifically how the SUs are set up, supervisory unions. And there was a big question of how the VSBA should get involved. We did vote last week, and let me tell you what, in fact, we voted on the motion, and let me just read the motion that they voted unanimously for, that the Vermont School Boards Association will participate in the development of legislation that creates pre-K to 12 education systems designed to provide students with more equitable access to world-class learning opportunities, to ensure greater flexibility in the management of public resources and less volatility for taxpayers, and maintain strong community involvement and support for our schools. the bottom line is that there's this view that the legislature is likely to pass something, is likely to enact something in this legislative system, session. And the school board association wants to be part of that process. They want to try to influence this process. How it's going to do that is not entirely clear. But I don't think it's necessarily going to be to South Burlington's best benefit. I mean, at one point we asked a question of how many people of the, I think there's 29 members on that board, how many people were a district such as South Burlington, a single district, and there are 2 people. So there are 27 people who are dealing with supervisory unions, and there's a broad array of opinions on lots of people think that their supervisory unions are working just beautifully, and some not so. But nevertheless, there is agreement that we are going to try to be involved and try to influence this at the association level. My concern is that I understand it's appropriate, certainly, and one of the big things that the association supports is community involvement, which I translate to local control of schools and districts. But that potentially is not going to lead to anything happening if that, I mean, because the other thing that the association is supportive is making sure that local schools are not closed, or small schools. If I can find exactly how they put this. One of their that include protections against unwanted school closures, and yeah, I understand that, but that's not necessarily going to get us there as far as saving costs statewide. But nevertheless, I mean, it seems to be in the right direction. The concept of having fewer supervisory unions and having K through 12 systems, it certainly would help with governance. It would help with accountability. For instance, you have superintendents out there who are reporting to multiple boards, and I think by reporting to multiple boards, the superintendent ends up not being accountable, and that potentially is affecting the budgets, the tax rates, as well as the opportunities for the kids in those kind of supervisory unions. So the idea is that this will make it, if this happens, K through 12 systems, it'll be easier to have accountable superintendents and accountable administrations and more accountable school boards as well, for that matter. But it's interesting that they're really looking at this as more of a longer term, how do we continue to offer equity and strong opportunities for the kids in a sustainable, using their language, manner, a manner that doesn't have the volatility of taxes. And that's a good thing. And I think it is a good thing that the VSBA is actually going to try to be involved in this process. I am concerned that because they have to reach or try to reach consensus in the state of Vermont, and there's so many different school boards, it's going to be tough to influence the process. But in any event.
There's a more specific role South Burlington should be playing. I mean, I understood their rationale to get a seat at the table because that ship was going to sail regardless.
Right.
But a seat at the table may, and what I'm hearing from you is just a seat at the table may not represent South Burlington's interests.
I think in the larger sense it doesn't necessarily. I mean, I don't see that there's going to be anything directly adverse to South Burlington. But if we're thinking that 2/3 of our tax rate is increasing because of things out of our control, and if part of the solution is changing the governance statewide, then it certainly is in our interest that way. And is the school board association being at the table necessarily going to move it in the right direction? I think it probably, I mean, there does seem to be some push behind it because I think everybody, including all, it was all the SU members who were at the association's meeting, they all are recognizing, well, most of them, there were actually a couple who, for some reason, the way the state financing works, it's worked in their favor and they don't have a tax increase. So that, oddly. But there does seem to be a recognition that something needs to change. But what exactly that's going to be is not clear. So I mean, I was really sitting back and trying to understand how best for us from South Burlington to interject, but at this point, it's really the SU folks who are driving this to some extent, and at least we are on the ship leaving the dock, the train leaving the station, the cart being pulled by the horse, etc.
And I mean, I in reading the legislative work, you know, that, and Martin, you know, read that specific piece, and then the work that we've done. I think Martin's right. There's some good work happening. I'm just worried about the pace, you know, and there doesn't seem to be any specific action currently in front of them currently now that does anything but continue the status quo. And you can look at the work that we did, and that's worrisome because as Martin alluded to, and we all know, the forecasted future continues to perpetuate the same issue. And I think it's upon us, and I recognize the small schools want to preserve the small school, but
I think
there's nothing.
It could work in the right direction if you have K through 12 systems. It may increase flexibility to consolidate schools if necessary. Just presumably we have more flexibility, although of course it would be an uphill battle even in our single district to consolidate to 2 elementary schools. We understand that would be a huge deal if that comes down the pike someday. But it still is easier than if you have an SU with 5 school boards plus the SU board or whatever. So.
I think it's good work. I just feel like there are some low-hanging pieces of fruit that could be implemented in the legislature right now that could help, like phase 1 of the movement. And we've outlined some of those. And
I think that's actually, that brings me to, I forgot to make this point, that the biggest problem I have with this is, it is long-term, but it seems like all the focus of the VSBA, except for Steve Dale's rebuttals of Governor Shumlin, is focused on this. And I didn't really hear about other efforts, such as trying to get more money from the general fund back into the education fund. That doesn't seem to be a focus at all, unfortunately.
All right. So we'll shift on to agenda item 12, setting the agenda for the March 5th meeting.
So that's in your packet, and we have asset protection on there, which we think we may have to move, I think, right? Because it's Julie and Martin, and so we may need to move that, I think. But you'll have to, that's pushing it, given kind of where we are in the week ahead, right?
Yeah, we're both.
So we'll move that out to the next one.
I'm around if we're ready to go. I don't know if anybody else is around. No. I don't want to do it by myself, but if anybody else is around, I'd be happy to do that. And if you guys want to not do it.
Diane's
Do you think, Dan, are you around?
So that's this asset protection?
Yeah.
I'm around, I'm around, and if we need to substitute for them, that's fine.
Yeah, we can trade with you.
John?
Well, we can figure that out.
So we're
Not
gonna pick
gonna
this
be
up next week?
John's.
Oh, wait,
Give
John's
me
got
that.
to be
John-
ready.
John-
The
John-
reason that we didn't do it for this meeting is because the report wasn't ready, or we would have done it.
Yeah, the question is, what's the issue?
No, it wasn't.
Oh, next meeting.
Well, originally, but we kicked it off, right?
Yeah.
I'm not calling you
No,
out.
no,
I'm
I-
trying to get myself off.
It was in our first
I'm just-
February, but we didn't get it on the agenda.
Oh,
Well,
okay,
is it
whatever.
feasible to get it to Dan and Diane before the March 5th meeting? I guess that's the question, right?
Right, and that's why we kind of had it pushed out.
So that means next Friday. Yes, but I do want to really focus on nutritional services year end. There's different run rates and new discounts, and I don't want to make, that's why it's not there this time, because I need 8 hours to do that. But I'm supposed to have it done, so I will.
Well, I don't want to complicate things. I was just trying to be helpful, but now I'm not being helpful at all. So can we rewind everything?
Well, how about Martin and I do it for the following meeting?
I think that makes good sense.
That's fine.
But that was really nice of you.
Thank you very much. I'll give you, you can do it for the next meeting if you want in place of me.
So can we just add to this agenda an update for about the RFP process?
And if
Update on the
for the
RFP.
yeah, if it's possible to have scheduled some meetings with follow-up with the folks that expressed an interest, that would be ideal.
That's kind of going to happen in a smaller group is the hope.
Right.
So maybe Diane will pull on you since you're around, maybe have a couple options here. John?
I have a question on what's required on 9, inter-district collaboration opportunities.
Just, this was about, talking about kind of our collaboration with, the Essex, the Burlington, Colchester. So that's what that was on there for. Again, along the line of some of the discussions happening in and around the legislative process and some of the local boards.
This looks like, when we're taking 2.7 off, this looks a little lighter. A couple items that aren't on our future agenda items, but I know should be, would be a fundraising update. Is it possible that might be available by then?
At least an update is fine, I think, yeah.
David, we have a committee meeting tomorrow. So yes.
Right. Again, certainly the update, there's been a lot of work done on this. It's not been.
So we could add that.
I think the update's fine.
And then I know one that we often have on the annual agenda, I didn't look to see if it's there, but just the foundation. And I don't know when it's appropriate to have an update, but.
This is the South Burlington School Foundation, is what she's referring to.
Yeah, and Martin, are you still representing the board on the foundation?
I guess, yeah. I am, but it never meets.
Okay,
no.
it hasn't been.
I think it met last year once.
Well, it has to meet in order to
it met
its
once,
status,
to maintain its status, but.
So whether that's appropriate or not, to make that call,
we'll
but it's kind of out there. And then the other thing that we had been talking about is after town meeting, scheduling a retreat. So I don't know if we had looked at dates or not.
We really haven't. I mean, we knew this was kind of in a busy time, so we haven't tasked anybody to figure that out.
So I'm wondering if we could ask if maybe you could throw a couple of dates out.
Into the month of April?
I think March, early April.
Just
maybe if we can get a couple of dates out just to see if we can't identify. And I think we were talking about maybe a 4-hour window.
An evening?
It could be.
We know your schedule is.
I guess I was thinking the alternative. We've sometimes met on a Saturday too.
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay. But
okay.
We'll see what people's availability is then. Okay. Any other future agenda items that haven't been covered?
Couple things. First of all, I kind of think we can actually take education quality standards, common language out of there, because it was mainly talking about ends, and I think just Patrick's
UQS
discussion today kind of satisfied me as far as, I mean, it's something I want to keep track of, but.
Well, we need to keep track of it, it's upon us, so it's not like it's going to go away, but I think the idea was to give you a little bit of an update.
Right, so I don't know if we need to have this on here or not, but I would like to add.
That's not fair.
She doesn't like that.
I would like to add something about the master planning, and I think that that Mark had an interesting point that we should talk about in the context of master planning is how does this proposed fifth grade move, how could it affect, either make more flexible or less flexible down the road for the master planning? I mean, that's kind of what's prompting that I'd like an update of where we are in master planning, because if
Sure.
we're making this decision on fifth grade, it shouldn't be in a vacuum from that.
Yep.
I also think that we should look back at the minutes at when this fifth grade move was proposed years ago, because I think Mr. Marabella has a point there, and he said that the reaction of parents was very similar, and we may be able to learn something from it.
Yeah. I wrote that down. I think it's good. You know, there's a lot of good feedback that's come from PTO meetings, the feedback, and so.
You also seem to drop the policy consideration on performance evaluations from the blue sheet to the white sheet.
From the blue sheet.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This one here.
No, it's a student copy over, yeah. Yep, no problem.
And I don't know if the master plan, I mean, I guess along with the master plan, it's the 2020 vision. I'm thinking both of these things
Yep,
kind
that's
of
good, Martin.
together. And there was something else earlier in this meeting that I mentioned, and I can't remember what it was. I wanted to put on the future, but my mind is
You
mush
can
at
add
this
it later.
point. Oh, right, that TEL survey and how the administration is using that data.
Well, we need to figure out what the correct data is before
Well,
we can.
well,
figure out.
We've
the
received it.
administration can tell us that.
We've been receiving it. So.
Yeah, I'd just like
And
to
we've
see
been
how that.
reviewing it.
Yeah. What kind
We
of
have,
actions?
you know, we get it back. We get a lot of survey stuff back, so.
Well, actually, maybe a broader
Tell
topic
survey.
to that would be, and we had talked about this before, is just to understand any recent surveys and, you know, make sure that if it's relevant, the board's getting updates on
Any survey.
other feedback, yeah. Because I know we've had them, so.
Are we going to get a report of the kneecaps?
Stuart's working on that now,
Anytime you want.
so we'll put it on. I mean, again, I'm trying to be a little bit conscious of the load that's been happening, but we definitely, you know, I was thinking we probably would get that out to you in March and just have it as a report probably, but a report out from me and my superintendent's report.
So you can see it there.
So, well, we can add it.
I'm just saying, it's available anytime you want to see it.
No, we'll put it on the superintendent's report. Upcoming, it's fine.
All right. Okay, we've got minutes of the February 5th meeting. Any changes? Seeing none, those are approved. Minutes of the February 10th meeting.
Yeah, it needs to just say that David and I both left at 5:45.
What date was that? February 10th? We have a consent agenda item for a new hire. Do you want to cover that?
This is again at Orchard. This has been a kind of an ongoing situation for them to fill some capacity. They were initially trying to go out with a teacher in a very part-time status. They then had a literacy person actually fill in on the classroom status. So this is essentially backfilling that position. And the person's, you know, well-versed in this particular area. So again, the remainder of the year is clearly understood, but to provide us with some support here as we round out the year. So again, they worked hard to try to hire somebody because of the amount of, you know, the amount of time in the year. It's not been somebody that just didn't want to take a gamble on with the classroom. So this is the recommendation.
So is this a temporary hire?
Yeah, this is a temporary.
So to have a motion to approve the hiring recommendation of half an FTE reading mathematics teacher at Orchard.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions on AP order number 30? That's been covered. And we have an action item on agenda item 17 on a AP order for Howard Center in the amount of $56,630.75. And can we just get a quick
Yeah, it's the
recap?
third quarter payment for our school social workers. So this is the third quarter payment. Because it exceeds the 50, then this is why it calls into board action.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the AP order to Howard Center in the amount indicated?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any questions, clarification? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Announcements?
So at your place, you do have some announcements, and those of you, again, it was nice to see some board responses to the math counts teams. You saw some pretty, we had a first, second, third, and fifth respectively here, and so again, John Radimer and his work over the years, he's a great teacher to that. But again, congratulations to those students. Obviously, the annual Penguin Plunge and money that went towards Special Olympics was a event that, again, the community here at Tuttle has benefited from, and was an important piece. Remember that we have tomorrow is budget presentation at Channel 17, and also a couple of board members will be also on. The pre-town meeting is March 3rd at 7 o'clock. Orchard Skate Night, those neighborhood learning communities, which Jason referred to, again, trying to get you caught up. I think we've been a little behind in those, but again, those have been going on, and in fairness, PAC has been an important player to that as well, around a nice joint effort to that as well.
Just out of curiosity on that one, are we getting pretty good representation in all the neighborhoods of our various schools?
I don't know, Elizabeth. I can find out kind of what the
I think that would be helpful.
I think one of the problems, David, I think the packed relationship with this is so great, but I think that one of the problems is that there tends to be the same group that comes to the packed dinners, and I think that we're potentially missing an audience that we should be addressing by not maybe trying to find another group to glom onto, if you know what I mean. Because I think we need a different bunch of people as well. I think we need all people to be, as many people as we can, to be have a voice, if you will.
And that's part of my question about neighborhood representation. Yeah.
So again, the reach out is to try to get into different neighborhoods and solicit the feedback, and some of the students and some of the folks that have been part of some of that work can help maybe. That's kind of Jason's call out, for example, tonight.
Are these meetings targeted places, or are they? I mean, I got the impression from the presentation that we invite you to volunteer to do it, kind of on a voluntary basis, as opposed to we need representation from all these different places. Let's get somebody to get a group together and figure any other place.
They're looking to try to blanket the city to get authentic feedback from all of the constituencies throughout. What's happening, and I think to Julie's point, is that it's probably replaying with some of the same groups, and so how do we reach out to the different communities so you can host them, and that's kind of what's being encouraged, and then those get chosen, and then people can go to those. So anyway, it's always hard. I mean, there's some communities that are a little bit more available to do that. Also, I don't need to repeat what is in there. The DECA state competition winners went to South Burlington. And then lastly, I wanted to just let you know about the South Burlington. As you know, we're fortunate here at the high school. We have some trail out back. If you haven't been out there, it's we use it not frequently enough. And so John Painter, along with his students, have come up with this multi-use trail, and so there's a grant that is currently going to be submitted through the Vermont Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation to fund the project. And so, again, this would allow for biking, running, all kinds of different things, and obviously it's environmentally friendly. It has to be done. It's in support of the South Burlington Recreation Path Committee as well. So he's got a lot of folks in there. So it's really just to give you an update, an FYI. We hope to receive, and we'll keep you posted as that unfolds, so, anyway, just wanted to keep you posted on that.
Is this then on district property? Is that what you're
On
saying?
district property in the back location of our high school property, out by the,
Does that bring any liabilities?
again, through our insurance, we've talked with our insurers, and again, we have, given the activities that would be there, it's certainly appropriate for us to be able to do it.
By whatever we
Yep,
have.
yep. Now, that would be determined in the long range around Visbit's involvement, Vermont School Board's Insurance Trust, but currently they're our insurance carrier and they allow that activity, so.
Okay. I think we have a board self-evaluation, if we can complete that before we wrap up. Are you done? Wow.
So speedy over here.
Should have done that before announcements. I never remember that. Or during. Julie and Martin. No pressure, Diane.
Thanks for putting the pressure on.
I just noticed you.
All right, Diane.
I'm going to recheck my work. Is that okay with you?
All right, we're just not including it today. Sorry.
Yeah.
Pretty scary. We have a couple disagrees, three disagrees on the data reports not being provided in advance of the meeting.
I was one of the disagrees. I'll just tell you, it would be really helpful to have the financial report before we have to discuss it. Nutrition services.
Oh, yes, yeah, no question. And then we have a couple disagrees that the agenda was followed, and adequate time was allowed for board discussion. It did go a little longer today. I said, I used less than my 10 minutes. I just want you to know.
We're a little long-winded.
Yeah, yeah, you try to speak after 3 hours of this. And then we have, it looks like all agrees on the school board meeting. And one comment, that it was a good meeting, good information from Jason, Patrick, Rhonda, and of course from David and John, but particularly welcome to hear those guys. I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? We're adjourned.
Corey.